wrecked, right? Is it wrecked? This guy is stressed.
It takes a little practice.
Stop! Hello, I'm Natalie Jacobson. New Englanders may know me as a reporter and anchor with a Boston television station. I'm also a person who loves to cook, thanks to my mother. She taught me the basics, which gave me the courage to experiment. So I've had fun trying new recipes and entertaining ever since. It was a lifetime gift, one I'd like to share with you. You know, one of the fun things about cooking is that you're always learning. Sear, deglaze, reduce, clarified butter, or how about when you ask a friend for a recipe and she says, oh, you know, a little of this, a little of that. A little of what? Well, what's a reporter without good sources? I tapped one of mine, Jasper White, owner of Jasper's on Boston's waterfront. Master chef, teacher, author. He can show us what your cookbook doesn't tell you. I should tell you before we start that when I designed this kitchen, I put a sink in my center island and I put my burners up against the wall. So in order to shoot this videotape, we brought an extra set of burners in here so we could better take pictures and you could better see what Jasper's doing. Now I know he's going to tell us that the first thing you have to have if you have anything in a kitchen is a good knife.
That's right. You need to have a lot of good knives.
Tap all your friends for birthday presents, Christmas presents,
Well,
and so
that's
forth.
a good idea. The way to sharpen a knife on a stone, this is an oiled stone. Use mineral oil, not vegetable oil, which will get all gummy. Hold the knife at about a 10-degree angle from the stone.
All right.
And give it a full swing from the back of the heel of the blade to the tip of the blade.
And you're keeping your left hand on the tip there.
I am, and guiding it and keeping it about 10 degrees off the stone. And hit both sides, just reverse it.
How often do you have to do that?
About 5 or 6 on each side, and
Okay.
then you can feel it if you've gotten what you need. The steel is very often mistaken as a sharpener. This does nothing to sharpen your knife. It can only help keep it sharp, and it removes the fine burrs on the edge of the blade.
That's why my knives never got sharp. I thought that
Cannot
was
sharpen a knife
sharpener.
on a steel. When you use a steel, the best way, some chefs go like this. I find the best way is to do it away from you. And again, hold it at about that same 10-degree, maybe even a little more, maybe 20-degree angle, and work from the butt of the blade, the bottom, to the tip, and run it right across that whole steel.
The recipe might call for slice, sliver, dice, Julienne, mince, shred, grate, pear, peel, which might make you want to throw it all in a food processor and just push the button.
But it's not that difficult.
I was hoping you'd say that. Okay.
And let's start with onion, of course, being the king of vegetables, and something
king.
you'll do very often. Okay, see, I don't even have to show you. You're ahead of me
Well, I
already.
know a couple things, Josh.
Right, and then right in half.
All right.
Okay.
And that's a good hint,
And
right?
then
You know how an onion rolls around your board a lot?
And then we clean it up.
Okay.
All right. Now, very important. When you're working with a knife, keep your fingers curled in at all times. So when you're holding that onion, this is what you don't want to see. See the way my fingers are out? This
Right.
is what you do want to see. And you keep that knife, you see that? I'm smacking my knuckles against with the knife. You keep that knife against your knuckles, and if you slip, you won't cut yourself. And then you just work your way back and let your hand guide you.
Now, could I slice it this way too to get longer slices? Can I do that?
You can do that, yes.
You wouldn't, but I can do that.
No, you can do that, depending on what it's for, but this is a more uniform slice.
And a sliver is merely a thin slice,
A
right?
sliver's a thin slice, and so if we wanted to sliver garlic,
Okay.
we just,
Here we go.
I don't know if the camera can even show how thin that is. I've got about 10 slices, and I've only gone about a 1/4 inch into that.
Okay.
So that's a sliver.
Jasper, I got to confess that I've always used a garlic press until I met you. Tell me the difference.
I don't think these are a good idea because I think that they extract too much of the juice out of the garlic and turn it bitter.
Okay. So much for the garlic press.
So you want to mince, start by slicing the garlic, and then it's just a matter of chopping real fine.
Let me try one of those guys. Can I take this knife like so and do this? Or is that stupid?
This is, if you're going to do that technique, what you do is you rock the knife. So keep it stationary. That's why the knife has that shape. See? And you rock the knife.
I get it.
And then, so you're not slamming your knife against the board and making the blade dull quicker than it needs to get dull.
Now, when the recipe calls for vegetables that are cut julienne, how do you do that?
We're doing a carrot first. Take just a little sliver off. See how? And that's going to steady the carrot so it doesn't roll.
So I can put it on its flat side
right,
now
and
to
then
cut
you
the
can
rest of it.
save these little scraps like this for stalks later on.
Okay.
And then cut it into about almost a quarter-inch straight down. Okay. And then to julienne, you just take those strips.
Take one at a time?
Right.
And rock.
And rock it. And that's a julienne.
So a julienne is merely a
thin
skinny
slice.
Piece of a vegetable. Maybe you can get your kids to eat vegetables when they look so skinny they don't think they're eating so much.
That might work. And in cooking, there's really 4 dices. Brunoise, which is the smallest, small dice, medium, and large dice.
Brunoise, was that the first one?
Brunoise. And to make that smallest brunoise cut, first you do is julienne what you're cutting.
Okay.
And then just come right across.
Okay.
And see how beautiful that little... And that's just, brunoise is a very small dice.
I've also heard the terms chiffonade and batonette. Show me.
Okay.
Por favor.
Chiffonade is a very fine julienne, and it's usually used for doing herbs like this basil we have here, or lettuces, or other fine things. So,
now, why would you want to cut something that fine, though, or like especially an herb?
To put it into a sauce at the last minute.
Okay.
You know, and
you do put them in the last minute,
sure.
Is that it?
That's when you have them that fine, certain herbs, yeah. Okay, batonette is like a julienne.
All right.
Okay, so the method's the same, but it's a larger size. So batonette comes from the word baton. And it would be a julienne, see?
Just thicker, bigger.
But larger.
And why would you use that?
Let's say for a stew or something that
where the
wanted to
meat's
cook a
gonna
little
cook a long
longer.
time.
And you wanted something that looked a little more refined.
But how about something simple like peel?
Sure, we can do that. And here's a good little trick. Sometimes these peelers get dull and they don't peel very well. Take the tip of the steel and run it right in between there, and it sharpens your peeler up a little bit.
Oh, wait, do that one more time. On the inside? The inside
just
of
put a little pressure on the inside.
Cool, okay. Yep, got it.
There's no big secrets about this, but just peel it, pull out the little eyes, and then if you're not going to use potatoes right away, keep them in water like this potato.
So they won't brown?
So they don't turn brown.
So another thing you can do, though, right, is just scrub it with a brush?
Well, you can do that, yes.
Scrub away the dirt?
Yeah.
And therefore you don't lose the vitamins?
That's right. For some dishes, the outside might be a little strong.
Would you do it this way maybe for a stew or a pot roast?
Yeah, you could do that.
Before we get away from this, you've got to show me about cleaning and slicing mushrooms.
Okay.
Do you peel mushrooms? Do you scrub mushrooms? Do you wash mushrooms? What do we do with these?
Mushrooms, the best way to clean mushrooms, these are just ordinary button mushrooms, but any of the mushrooms that you'll find now, the creminis and shiitakes and all, the best way is just to wipe the mushroom.
You're kidding, no water?
No liquid, because the mushrooms absorb liquid, and then when you go to saute them, they don't brown up nicely. They just start steaming right away.
But the mushrooms can be pretty dirty, though.
Well, the mushrooms, like all foods, they grow in the dirt.
Right.
And they grow in the dark, but I'd say, if you give them a good wiping, that's all they need.
You don't have to worry about the dirt that might remain.
I don't think that's
So if you just rinsed them quickly in water?
Well, this is the best way to do it. And if nobody's looking, if you want to wash them, that's okay.
Okay. Now, how about the stems here? Do we pull these out, or?
It depends. If you're stuffing the mushroom, you'd pull the stem out.
But is this edible?
Yes, it is edible. And it's also, the stems, if you're saving them, are good for stock, and they're good chopped up for soup, too.
Okay.
If I was going to saute this mushroom, I would just trim a little bit of the stem off, and I would save that
And you would
leave
keep
a little
the
on
rest.
because it gives it a beautiful shape and it gives it the natural shape. See, the nice slices. And for sautéing, you want to slice mushrooms thick. For other purposes, if you want a thin slice, then they're also...
Oh, what a show off.
Okay.
Sure. Before we get to our fruits, probably a good idea to clean these veggies off. So the apples don't taste like garlic. In fact, you might flip your board over or have a separate board, would you say?
And also, I noticed my board was sliding. Would you hold this for a minute for me? And if you take a damp cloth and put it underneath your cutting board, it'll reduce the amount of slipping that the board does. Okay, now we're going to show zest. It's the outside, and to get a real zest, you want to not have any white. So what you'll do is when you're doing it with a knife, take it and then take the knife and go back and take most of that white out.
Could you just be more careful the first time around?
It's pretty hard. You could,
okay.
But you're going to have to go back and trim some of it anyway.
Okay.
And you get most of this white off.
Now, why do recipes even call for zest? Is it a strong flavor? Or?
The oils are in the skin, so you have a lot of oils, and it's a different flavor, and it's
distinctive, isn't it?
It's distinctive. Also, you can get the zest by using the grater. Use the finer or the medium size on the grater. Don't go too far into it. You just want to get the yellow part.
So zest is just the outer skin of a fruit.
That's true.
What's this called?
Zester.
I always wondered what that was.
And look at it, makes this beautiful,
That's how they get those curls.
Okay. So that's a great way to do it.
Wait a minute. Wait a second. Hang on. What about this? What is this?
This is called a channel knife. It's used for decorating some foods, and it can be used for cutting big zest. And you just hold this against the knife and watch what this does.
Gives you a bigger one.
Gives you a big one.
More for like twists?
Yeah.
Or for decorations?
For decorations.
Okay, one more cutting technique, shredding, Jasper, before we leave our boards. Especially like for cabbage and cheese.
Shredding and grating. Okay, with cabbage, what you do is, first of all, quarter it.
Okay.
And then cut the cores out.
Now, do you have to wash it first?
Well, most people wash it afterward, but it's
it's easier afterward, right?
Yeah, and some people also, once you shred cabbage, if you put it in cold water, it makes it less strong.
Now, when you're shredding cabbage, are you just slicing or what?
Slicing very finely.
With that rocking action on that nice blade.
That's the best way. Just keep that tip of the knife on the table. And
easy enough, huh?
Yeah, it's just like
now, a lot of people have food processors. They could grate in there.
In the food processor.
Or how about cheese? Grating cheese can take a long time, and this can be a time saver, I guess.
Yep, it's a little faster than what I'm doing.
But I have more cleanup than you do, right? Now, how do you know which side to use on those graters? They're different sizes, so is it just a matter of preference?
It depends what you're grating for. For Parmesan and Romano cheese, you want to use the finer blades.
Right.
And for larger, cheddar or Swiss.
Like when you're going to melt it.
You're going to melt it or whatever, you use the larger blades.
Okay. Good enough. I think one of the most intimidating knife techniques for me is trying to open and cut shellfish.
And it is, I think for a lot of people it is. The first thing you have to remember is the oyster and a clam are living creatures. So before you even get to the point where you want to open them, you want to handle them very gently. If you bang these around, they're going to be twice as hard to open up.
Because they're living creatures actually tense up?
Because they are, and they tense up. The tip of the oyster is the weak spot, or the Achilles heel. And when you put that knife in, it's not a matter of brute strength, it's a matter of leverage. And I'm actually twisting the knife like you would the throttle on a motorcycle. So I put the tip in there, and then I just work it back and forth. From there. And then once I'm in, there's a muscle on the top of the oyster. I take the knife along the top,
scraping
and
right
cut
under
that
the
muscle.
top. All right.
Now I have the whole oyster. And then it's just a matter of, and that's how you shuck an oyster. Now you always want to have crushed ice when you're serving them on the half shell and you do an oyster. You want to have the crushed ice so that you can keep that level and keep the juice from spilling out of the oyster. Clam's a little different. Okay, the little neck clam, to me, I've always thought it was shaped somewhat like a harp. And if you think of this top corner as the corner of the harp, that's the weak spot. Put the clam right into the palm of your hand.
Okay.
and line the knife up with the shells, and then just pull it in. Just squeeze it right in like that. Then you give it a little twist, and there's two muscles, one here and one there. So you give it a little twist and cut that muscle, then cut that muscle. Again, just like an oyster, try to hold it level so that you keep all the juices in, and that's all there is to it.
Okay, let me try this. All right, I want to get the knife right in between, and I want to squeeze. Oops, it would help if I had the right side of the knife. Right, I knew there was a problem. This guy is stressed.
It takes a little practice, but...
Now, why can't I do it? These clams don't want to open for me. I put my knife right in here somewhere. Okay, I think I got it. I squeeze.
You got it.
I don't believe it. I think I did it.
You did do it.
Now I wiggle it, right?
Yeah.
And then I loosen the muscle here,
Yeah.
and a muscle here.
There
I
you
open
go.
this little baby. Ta-da! Oops, I spilled a lot.
Right.
And I scoop it out, right?
That's it. They take a little practice.
All right, let's try shrimp. Now, most shrimp will have been frozen.
Unfortunately, yes, but
You thaw it in the fridge?
The best way to handle them is to thaw them very slowly in
Okay.
your refrigerator.
Okay.
And then after they're defrosted, you would just peel them. For sautéing, I like to leave the that last little section on there, which is
By the
just gives
tail.
it a nice look. And,
Now, how long does it take to defrost in the refrigerator?
from the frozen state up
Yeah.
to more than 24 hours.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you got to plan ahead.
You do have to plan ahead. There's a vein that runs down the center. And
Is it the back or the front? The underside or the top side?
This is the top of the shrimp.
Top.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so all you do is take the paring knife and don't go more than a 1/4 inch into that shrimp. And there you can see the little vein. And basically, all you want to do is lift that out, and you can just give it a little rinse in some water, and it's all set.
See this vein on the inside?
No,
Underside?
that's nothing to worry about.
Nothing.
No.
So it's only on the top
It's on
side.
the top piece that you want to devein.
Got it. I would never buy a whole fish because I wouldn't know what to do with it. But I confess that the few times I've been lucky enough to catch one, I wish that I
That's
had
right.
known. So
And I think that's
show us what to do.
the situation most people will be in. Okay, there's a couple ways you can do it. I think for most people, the easiest thing is to get rid of the head right away.
That sounds good to me.
And take
I'll
a nice
stand
cleaver
back.
like this, right through. And that's out of the way. We'll just come right down this backbone.
With a very sharp knife.
With a very sharp fish fillet knife. And I will explain a fillet knife as a thin blade, and it's got to be flexible for that to work. Okay, then I've loosened that up off that center backbone, and now I am taking the knife. Let me just turn this a little so you can see it better, and just loosening it right off.
Right off that breastbone, that center bone?
Off of that center bone.
Okay.
And then I just come right along.
And that's fairly
And that's
easy
your
to...
fillet.
Wow.
Basically, you just do the same thing on the other side. And on cod, come in, keep that knife right on the backbone, and you're going halfway through. You see the bone here?
Let me feel... What do I feel? Let me stick my finger in the... Oh, I don't feel anything. I
That
feel
edge.
flesh on this side. The
Feel
bone
that
is on
edge?
the inside.
That's how far I go through on the first
Way
cut.
down inside. Okay.
So I got the tip of my knife
Almost halfway through the fish, really.
halfway through the fish. And then I just come back.
And now you're
From the
going to...
other
It's almost
side.
like peeling it away from that bone
And
now?
then loosening it off that bone.
Maybe you can just turn that a bit there.
Yeah.
I know that makes you work backwards, but...
Okay.
You make it look so easy, Jasper.
Well, it is pretty easy when you're done, when you do it often. Okay? And those are your fillets. The only way to really know what you're getting is to buy the fish with the skin on. And this is obviously a cod. It's got that nice brown skin. If you don't want to eat that skin, the way you do it is you take the tail piece and just make a little incision.
Okay,
right
straight
to
down,
the skin.
vertically. But
And
not
then-
through it.
And start going sideways a little. Now you have something you can grab onto.
Okay.
And you...
Right along that skin.
just keep
Easy
that.
enough.
And I'm just keeping that knife at just a very slight angle against the skin.
Look at that. All right, we'll get rid of these wooden porous boards.
And we're going to replace them with these synthetic rubber boards.
And the point of this is so that we don't keep bacteria in the wooden boards.
That's right. These are non-porous, whereas the wood is porous, and they don't.
And unfortunately, we have to worry about that, right? With all kinds of meats, chickens.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Good idea, maybe just spend a couple extra dollars and buy one of these. Just keep it just for meat and chicken. Then you don't have to worry about your veggies.
Okay. See that leg? Put your thumb under the leg, like that. Okay. That's a safety thing. And take your cleaver. You could also do it with a French knife too.
How about, okay, boning knife?
Okay, right under there, and then just split it.
Man, you did that easily.
Now, I hide my thumb this time under the wing bone. All right, again, that's a safety precaution. And the next chicken I cut up, I'll use a smaller knife to show you that it's really not that hard. Okay, the breast, that is your breast. And you can trim that several ways. And we'll set that aside. The thigh and the leg. Now, on the back side of the leg, let me just trim this up a little bit. The back side of the leg, I don't know if you can see that little yellow line of fat there. Mm-hmm. Amazing thing about that, it shows you exactly where the bone splits.
Oh, for goodness sake.
So you can do it with no effort at all.
You want to use this knife?
Let me just do it again. Here, I'll show you the leg. I'll show you with a little knife just to prove that I'm not. There's that line of fat.
Oh, for goodness sake.
See? No effort at all. It goes right through it. So you've got your legs, you've got your thighs, and you have your breasts. And those are the primal cuts of chicken. And for the price of these breasts alone, you get this for free. Now, the boneless chicken breast. That skin just pulls right off the chicken.
And in this day and age, with everyone fat conscious, it's probably a good idea to get rid of the fat.
Yeah, you can get rid of that. Don't forget all these extra bones you can save for stocks. Stick them in your freezer. Now you've got a double breast on the chicken. And you've got these legs. This helps keep it steady. And I lift this other part on too. And you have the backbone right there.
Right down the center.
The breastbone. And you want to go right down the center. And once you find it, you can see that little bone. You can feel how hard it is.
You get a good look at that dark thing right there? Like, it's hard.
Once you find it, that's where you want to keep your knife pressed towards it. So you angle your knife towards it. And then you're going to come back here to the wishbone and keep that knife pointed in. So if you slip, you slip against the bone and you don't tear the chicken meat.
Oh, you're worried about the chicken meat. I was thinking about your finger.
No, I'm more worried about the meat on this operation. Then I come back and just loosen that meat right off the breastbone. Okay, right down to the joint, and then cut right through the joint. And that's your boneless chicken breast with the wing tip on. If you want to remove the wing tip, all you do is just cut right
next to the little bone.
That's your boneless chicken breast.
When recipes call for pounding, why are we doing that?
Okay, that's usually for tenderizing.
This would be for something that's big and thick and tough?
That's right. Yeah, probably like a piece of beef for stewing.
So something that's not as deep.
So this is beautiful for doing the veal, and we'll take a clean piece of plastic wrap.
And my point is here to make it flat or to make it tender?
Both.
Tell me when I've done enough.
A little more, a little more. Okay, that's going to serve that. That's good.
Great for taking out your aggression.
Yes, it is. Okay.
All right. Voila. Let's cook.
Okay, let's cook.
All right, Maestro, mushrooms for saute lesson number 1. A little fat.
Go ahead, right into the
pan. Yep. This is great when you're doing a videotape. You have a sous chef to have everything ready.
That's right. A little salt and pepper.
All right.
With mushrooms, if you like to give them a little color, then you don't flip them right away. That's when
you don't.
And sauteing, we'll start off by talking about, the word literally means to jump. So when you're sauteing, you don't need a spoon. Because all you have to do is help them throw them.
I want to know how many times that went on the floor before you could do that.
And it's the shape of the pan that all I'm doing is pulling back. And there's several types of sauteing. And
like this
right here we're doing a very straightforward, old-fashioned sauteing, the jumping kind of sauteing in a little bit of butter.
Or a little stirring if you're chicken, as I might be.
Butter. And in here we have vegetables cooking.
To get a jump on a little time here, what we did is we put those onions, garlic, celery, and green peppers that we chopped up a little bit earlier into this pan. And we've been sauteing them for about 10 minutes over a medium-high heat.
Right, which is also sauteing.
All right.
So we've got vegetables sauteing like these mushrooms, And then we have this sauteing
Definitely impressed with that.
for rice. Now we're adding the rice.
We add the raw rice to the vegetables, and the point of this is
To coat the rice with the vegetable oil and to heat it, and even to toast the rice a little bit for a little bit of extra flavor.
They smell good. Okay, we'll save those for the veal, maybe?
That would be a great idea.
So sauteing is cooking food in fat over a medium to high heat.
Yes, and that heat would depend on what you were
get a clean
cooking. For instance, these veal medallions that we're going to cook next need to be cooked on a very high heat.
And I notice you're going to use clarified butter, which is what? What is it?
Clarified butter is butter that has the water and the milk solids removed from it. And in the cases of you're clarifying salted butter, it also has the salt. So it's the pure fat from the butter.
What's the point? Why do
The point
it?
is that you can heat it twice as hot as you can whole butter, and it won't burn.
So you could heat it almost as high as like with oil, or as high.
As high.
As high as with oil. So you get the flavor of butter, and now you can use a higher flame.
A little bit of the flavor. You lose a lot of the flavor when you take the milk solids out of it.
Okay, all right.
So and we're going to salt and pepper the veal very lightly on both sides.
And I notice you don't use a shaker.
No, I like to use the salt with my fingers.
Now, it doesn't matter what kind of fat you use. I mean, there are oils, there's salt pork, there's butter, there's margarine.
It matters. It affects the flavor of the food and the temperature that you need to cook at. And certain fats, like sweet butter, has a very low burning point. In other words, you put it in a hot pan, it just burns right away.
I've seen your pan gets brown right away.
Other oils, like peanut oil, have a really high burning point, and so you can bring them to a very high heat. Olive oil and different vegetable oils, and that's why sometimes we combine butter, whole butter, with vegetable oils.
So the butter's for the flavor, the oil so that you can raise the flame under your pan.
Yes, and then we'll add the clarified butter to the pan.
When it sizzles, you know it's hot.
And see, we really don't need a lot of fat in this pan.
About a tablespoon worth.
And watch how quickly we are able to saute this meat and get a nice brown on it.
Now, you like to use your fingers for the salt. Is that to control the amount?
I do. You have total control over it, and I also like
So a pinch is really a pinch.
Right, and you have control over how much salt you're using.
Why kosher?
And I like the kosher salt because it's got more texture, so you can really feel what you're using. 30 seconds to get that meat nice and brown. Okay, now while this meat is cooking in the pan, another thing that's happening in this pan is that certain things are beginning to stick to it, and all those good things that stick to the pan are really great to eat. So we want to make sure we get to use those in the sauce. So at this point, I'm going to remove the veal from the dish, and
let's save it with those mushrooms over there.
Right, I'm gonna.
And now you're going to
I don't have much fat left. I'm just going to add a little bit of shallots to this.
Oh.
And that pan's so hot, that's really all it needs. And now at this point, we'll
That's
deglaze it. And we're going to use
10 seconds?
white wine here. 10 seconds.
And deglaze means to get all of the flavorings out of the pan.
And we're deglazing this pan, and what we're doing is the liquid, which can be wine, it could be water, it could be stock.
Your
choice? It would depend on the dish. It would depend on the dish. For instance, if it was a veal marsala, you'd use marsala wine. The liquid is loosening all these things off the bottom of the pan, and that becomes part of the flavor. At this point, we're reducing the liquid, and you'll see some recipes will call for...
Why? Why do we do that?
To make a real concentration of flavor.
Ah.
And now this was, what we did here was we demonstrated how to saute the veal, how to deglaze the pan,
right,
and then to reduce the liquid.
And how much do you reduce it to?
For most sauté dishes, down to very little, to at least half of what you put in there, to reduce it in half. And again, the recipes will tell you usually how much to reduce it.
Okay, we're going to go from sautéing, cooking over a high heat, to simmering, cooking in water over a low heat.
Exactly. Now we're going to add the stock,
right,
or broth. And we'll just stir it once.
Lower the heat?
We'll lower the heat.
Of course, I shut it off. There we go.
And we'll put the lid on.
And we let it cook until the liquid's absorbed.
Until all the liquid's absorbed.
Which is about, what?
25 minutes.
Okay.
20.
There are two kinds of frying. One calls for immersing the food totally in fat, and the other for using a little bit of fat on top of the stove in a frying pan. French fries look good. They don't look like done, though.
Well, they're not
Far be it for me to criticize.
No, they're not done. This is when you make large French fries, you have to blanch them twice.
Aha. Could you do that in water just as well?
You could, but it's always easier if you blanch them in the oil. You don't have that problem with the water spattering.
Ah.
So what you do is you blanch your French fries on a medium heat, and then you turn it up to a high. Now you can see these potatoes have no color, but they're very hot, even though I'm holding it.
And they look like they're cooked because they're
And they're cooked
bending.
through now. And so that now, the next time they fry, they're going to get real crispy on the outside, and they'll be real creamy on the inside.
Mmm, they look good. There you go. Little absorbent paper for you.
We'll just let these drain for a second. Yes. Beautiful, golden,
Non-fattening French fries.
non-fattening French fries.
So that's
And-
deep frying,
And that's deep frying. And, of course, don't forget a little salt on top.
of course. Okay, we'll let the crew give the French fries the official taste test while we turn to pan frying. If I recall correctly, it's more fat, less heat than sautéing.
That's right. That's right. And we're going to pan fry some red snapper in yellow cornmeal.
Now, why cornmeal? Why do you pick that over flour or something?
For the flavor of the corn, and the corn is delicious, delicious flavor with certain fish.
And why dredge it in anything? Why do you need to do that when you pan fry?
Because it's going to cook for a long time, and it would just probably shrivel up and kind of burn up, so it needs some coating to protect it.
Aha.
You know, because we're cooking it for longer, and we're usually cooking bigger pieces of fish or meat when we pan fry.
Okay.
So we'll dredge this in the yellow cornmeal
And dredge is just a fancy name for...
dipping or coating, let's
Okay.
say. And we'll need some oil to do this.
Okay. What kind of oil would you like?
Peanut oil, please.
Why peanut oil?
I like peanut oil because it has a very clean flavor, and it also has a neutral flavor that works very well.
Doesn't taste like peanuts. I won't taste
It
peanuts.
doesn't taste strong of peanuts. Maybe just the slightest hint.
Wow, have some oil.
And for pan frying, usually you're talking at least 1/4 inch of fat in the bottom of the pan.
Another wonderful, low-calorie, great-tasting dish.
Well, it doesn't have to be fattening because most of that oil should stay in the pan.
I like that. What are you doing?
Oh, I was just checking to see if the oil was hot enough, and it is.
With fresh parsley?
Yeah, well, it just happened to have it handy, but it is delicious to eat fried parsley, too.
Okay, so it sizzled. That told you it was
So
hot.
the pan is nice and hot, the oil's hot, and I'm going to put this in the skin side down first,
Why?
so I can really crisp up that skin side. And the side with the skin takes a little more cooking, so we're going to start it there.
Smells great.
Just give it a little shake to make sure that
How much-
hasn't stuck to the pan.
Sorry, how much time on the side?
About 3 minutes on this side and maybe two to finish it off on the other side. This fish just needs a little bit longer.
How about that piece? Is that a little thinner?
This piece is a little smaller, and I would venture to say this piece is done.
Okay.
And you can check it. Just
Want a
pick
knife?
a nice spot and check it, and you can see that's cooked all the way through. And all you want to do with this seafood is get it cooked through. Just barely, because a piece like that is going to keep cooking for another minute, too.
Ah, that's good
After
to
you take
remember.
it off.
Like with meat.
Just like with meats.
Ooh, that looks so good.
That is beautiful.
Why don't I just cut this
And with
so that you can see what it looks like when it is done.
see that fish is moist, and it's got the white center, and that nice dry coating on the outside. And as we talked about earlier, we did leave all the oil in the pan. Braising is, by definition, is cooking usually meat, sometimes poultry, in liquid under very low heat. Most braised dishes start by searing the meat. And
All right.
so we're going to first demonstrate how to sear meat. And we start by seasoning it with salt and pepper. And you can choose what kind of
Okay.
pepper, whatever.
Okay, I'll use this one just because we used the cracked pepper before,
Okay.
just for different. Okay.
And we'll
All right.
season this meat very well all around. And then I'm going to pass it to you, and we're going to dredge it in flour. And that's going to help it, give it a nice crust and help it brown very evenly. And we'll knock off the excess flour before we put it into this.
Okay, now this I don't do this, so I should dredge it in flour.
This helps it to brown. And then also what will happen later is that cooked flour will release into the into the juices and will lightly thicken your.
Okay, and we're going
Ready.
into some
Right in.
fat here.
Yep.
And this is what kind of fat?
We're using some rendered beef fat to sear this in, and you could use bacon fat. You
That's
could
what I
use
do.
a
Bacon
lot
fat?
of different fats, but I think for this pot roast that animal fat is really a good thing for it.
And the temperature kind of high, medium
Pretty
high?
high,
All
hot
right.
enough to really give it a crust and sear it.
And why are we searing it again? To seal in flavors?
We're searing it to give it flavor. First of all, the flavor from the searing itself, and also to seal in.
Okay, let's check it out. Not yet, huh?
Not browned yet. A little longer. Okay, that side is looking good. Now we'll turn it and we'll keep cooking it on all sides until it's browned all the way around.
Smells good already.
Now we're turning it onto its last turn, and that is now going to be completely browned all the way around.
Which is all searing means, so that takes care of
That's
searing.
right.
It only means browning. And now we lower the heat.
We're going to lower the heat just a little, and on this last turn while it's browning, I'm going to add some very finely chopped vegetables, some carrot, some onion, and a little bit of garlic.
And this is just for flavor.
And this is for flavor, and these vegetables are cut very small, and the sauce is going to cook for so long that basically these will just disappear and kind of melt away into the sauce. I'm going to let them brown with this meat at the last minute.
Let me just tilt this one so you can see this. See that? Those tiny little vegetables all will blend away, huh?
They'll basically just melt away with the pot roast.
Now we have the liquid?
We're going to add liquid. Now, at this point, there's a lot of variations. I like a little red wine, and so I'm going to add a little red wine.
Why not? You're in charge. You're entitled. A little red wine. Don't you love his proportions? Here's a little red wine.
Now, for the rest of the liquid,
That was about a cup
we
if we're
happen
keeping track.
to have some beef stock left over, and so why not use it? We're cooking beef,
Makes sense.
and it'll add a nice, rich flavor. If I had more, I might add more, and if I had less, of course, I would just add water. And then I don't have any more, so I'm going to add some water to this now.
And you're building to, it looks like, half a pot of liquid.
Yeah, almost between a half and 2/3.
All right.
So that's just a little more than half, and that's just fine. And I'm going to add a little bit of fresh thyme to this.
And in choosing the herbs, you just choose what you like, right? What tastes good
I
to
do.
you?
There's certain combinations that always work well, and fresh thyme really works well with almost all the meats. I wouldn't want rosemary or tarragon necessarily with this, whereas if this was a lamb stew, I might like the rosemary and tarragon.
All right, we'll check it later. Let's let it cook.
Okay.
You know about stovetop cooking now involving fat. Let's try stovetop cooking involving liquids, as in boiling, steaming, blanching, and poaching.
And we're going to start by poaching an egg. So we'll take a little bit of water in a small pot. We're just going to cook one egg at a time.
All right.
And we'll add a little vinegar, about a tablespoon of vinegar,
Okay, tell me when.
and about a teaspoon of salt. That's good.
Good.
And about a teaspoon of salt.
All right.
And then we'll take an egg and crack it.
What does that do, the vinegar and salt?
That helps it coagulate,
Okay.
the egg to coagulate. Crack the egg into a bowl, and the reason we do it into the bowl and not into here is if you have a bloody yolk or a broken yolk, it spares you from having to set the whole pot up over again.
Okay.
And then slide it gently into the,
You dip that
Pot.
bowl right into the water to be
Right.
gentle, huh? Okay.
and then just let that egg set for about 4 minutes. Now in this case, we're going to poach some fresh salmon, and
Now, what is this liquid?
this is called a court bouillon, and I'm going to fit these salmon neatly into this pot so that they're just barely covered, and then I'm going to tell you about court bouillon.
Okay.
Court bouillon is a liquid that we prepared earlier, and what we took was water and white wine, and this is what we strained out of it. We cooked peppercorns, bay leaves, fresh thyme, and some shallots and leeks, and simmered that for about 15-20 minutes till it got a beautiful full flavor, and then we put the salmon. We strained all of this out, and we chilled it, and we had it for use. Now you wouldn't have to chill it. You could make it, strain everything out, and then go right ahead and
What's
use
the
it.
proportion of wine and water?
It's about 3/4 water to
1/4
1/4 wine,
And just fill it with onions and herbs that you like.
and herbs that you like.
A court bouillon, huh?
Court bouillon, and here we're just helping this little egg along, but it seems to be coming out just binding up very
I love Eggs Benedict.
nicely.
When we go to brunch, on rare occasions, I order it, but I confess I'm intimidated to do this egg, but it's not so hard.
Okay.
And how long would you have to poach the salmon?
The salmon is, there's two things. If you're going to poach the salmon and take it out and serve it right away, this would probably take about 12 to 15 minutes to cook this through at this very low heat. If you were going to serve this salmon cold, you would cook it about 2/3 of the way. So in about 8 minutes, we would turn off the heat and allow the salmon to finish cooking and then actually chill right in the liquid. And you have a very moist salmon, which is excellent for serving cold.
I think testing for doneness, Jasper, is tough for people who aren't experienced as you are. How do you know when this egg's done?
Well, you can pretty much tell even looking at it. You want the yolk to be
Jiggly.
just warm and jiggly, and so I'd say this is done. All the white is cooked through, and that's a
pretty good, huh?
delicious breakfast. Now for the salmon, we're going to test this too. We're going to take one piece out, and remember that if we're going to serve the salmon cold, we're going to leave it in. We don't want it to be well done. We want to see.
You want to put it on the plate and we'll take a slice through it? I know you wouldn't normally do this.
No. What I'll do is I'll split it right here.
Okay, just so you can
look.
see.
And you can see that fish is about halfway cooked through. Okay? So we want to let it go just a little bit longer, probably another 3 or 4 minutes, and then we're going to turn off the flame, and that's it. And we're going to let it sit and cool in that liquid.
We move from poaching to steaming. Remember when your grandmother used to mush all the vegetables? Well, here's a way not to. How much is in here, Jasper?
We
Inch
have
of
about
water?
an inch of water in that pot.
Drop in a steamer.
Put in the steamer bottom, and then take whatever vegetable it is. And the length of time that it takes to steam the vegetables will be determined on how you cut it. But these little pieces of broccoli flowers will probably take about 4 or 5 minutes.
And they don't touch the water.
Cover it right back up. They don't never touch the water.
Okay.
The steam is just circulating. And also the other thing is I didn't stack them tightly. They're nice and loose so that the steam can circulate around those vegetables.
Okay. You can also do that, by the way, I might add, in the microwave. I use my microwave for vegetables, and they stay green, and you can undercook them.
That's right. And the beauty of steaming also is that it leaves a lot of the nutrients into the vegetables.
Okay, we've poached, steamed, and now we're going to blanch.
We're going to cook these green beans. And the reason that we blanch certain green vegetables is to get them cooked perfectly and then stop them when they're perfect. And then later we reheat them with any various numbers of ways, whether it's part of a garnish of a dish or a simple mixed vegetables. That way you can cook every vegetable separately and have them come out perfectly.
So it's great. Oh, okay. So this is to do when you want to do it in advance.
Right.
Save time later.
Now, with all vegetables, and especially green vegetables, it's good to taste the vegetable before you get a feeling. These are nice, fresh green beans. The fresher they are, the less time they're going to take to cook.
Let's not cook them. Cook this way.
And that's always another option. Okay, big pot of water, lots of boiling water, and lots of salt. The salt helps maintain the green color. No, not covered.
Okay.
Never cover green vegetables. Certain vegetables, like cauliflower, you can, but
why not green?
with green vegetables, it releases an acid that'll change the color of them, and they'll lose their color because it'll go back into it.
Except when you're steaming.
Right.
It's different when you put the vegetable in the water versus not putting the vegetable in the water. I get it.
Okay.
That's good. Keep your vegetable green by not covering it. I never knew that. Okay, it's been cooking about a minute.
Yeah, let's test these now. Let's see. Very tender, and they're ready to come out. Have some ice water ready.
Perfect.
Remember, these will keep cooking. If you just pulled them out, they would keep cooking till they're soft again. So put them right into the ice water, and now they're ready for whatever you need to use them for.
Now, could you even, if you wanted them warm later for dinner, you could just add some warm butter and
just later on that night, you could just take a little garlic and olive oil and saute them in the garlic and olive oil, like we did the mushrooms, real fast, nice and hot.
hot flame, one or 2 minutes?
I like to eat them. I love to eat green beans cold with fresh mint and a little olive oil and a little lemon juice on them. So there's a lot of things that you can do from here, but that's the basic of blanching green vegetables. And when you hear the word shock, or you read the word shock in a cookbook, what we did when we took it from the hot water to the cold water, that's shocking vegetables.
Got it. Okay. Now, when a recipe calls for peeling tomatoes, I switch recipes.
It's very easy.
Okay.
You take the plum tomato And the plum tomatoes are very flavorful, so they're good for using for peeling.
All right, we're just taking out this little end segment.
And then score the very top of this.
The other side.
On the other side. So we pulled the core out, and we scored the top.
Okay.
And now we'll take that off, and that's really boiling. Throw this in there. Here, we've got a few extra that we've prepped here.
Okay.
And
now the point of this is to loosen the skin, I gather.
it is. And it doesn't take long at all. But wait, in 30 seconds, we'll check these tomatoes. And when the tomatoes come out, I'll do a quick test. And if they're peeling easily, sometimes you can even see the skins will break, which that hasn't happened yet. These tomatoes are not. If the tomatoes are very ripe, the skins will break when they hit the water.
Now, would you do this with fruits too, like with peeling peaches?
You can peel peaches this way too. You'd use a little gentler heat to
Okay.
peel the peaches.
This way you've got a rapidly boiling
This is
water.
really
we did
a high heat.
Okay.
And I can see already, see how that skin just peeled is going to come right off?
Yep.
So
they're
I know
done.
these are ready. So now I want to shock them in cold water because the cold water is going to stop them from cooking. If I let them sit warm, the tomatoes would turn to mush.
Okay, so we didn't want to cook the tomato, we just want to
don't
be able
wanna
to
cook
peel
We
it.
just want to be able to peel it.
All right,
And so we get these out and see how easy these peel now.
you do.
Just take that paring knife. You almost can do it without a knife. And just pull that skin right off the tomato.
Okay,
and
put it in the
just peel it.
refrigerator and store it for later, right?
And then there's many uses for this peeled tomato, like this.
The last of our techniques of cooking with water is probably the easiest and yet one that people make a lot of mistakes on.
That's for sure.
Boiling. Talk to me.
Okay, the most important thing is that you have a lot of salted water.
Can't put too much in, right?
Yeah,
We'll cover it, bring it to a boil. Maybe a good way to remember this is you want your pot big enough and enough water so that every strand of pasta has enough room to roll around freely. Okay, we're rolling here, almost. Would you say that's not enough?
I would wait till it's really rolling, full
Okay.
boil.
All right. Cover on helps it go faster, except when you're watching the pot boil. There are some truisms to these old things,
Yes.
you know. That looks good, huh?
Okay, we got a rolling boil. I'm going to put the pasta right in, dump the whole thing right in, and make sure you give it a stir as soon as it hits that water
To spread it out.
to spread it out.
Should you
And to
put the
keep it
top
from-
on real quick just to bring it back to a boil fast? No, do not do that.
You can do that if you'd like. Yeah, you can put it back. So, also another thing we might mention here. Now we're starting to come back. We want to start is some people put oil. Some people particularly put olive oil in the pasta water.
Should
And
you?
I want to emphasize it's the boiling salted water that really is crucial for success. And if putting a little olive oil in the water, if that makes you feel better, if it's a family tradition, then by all means do it, but it really has no effect on the pasta.
I can hear it boiling, I think. Here we go, we're boiling again.
Okay, let's just
Can we
see.
check
One
it?
more stir, and then every once in a while we'll do it. This I can tell by just the way it's
Yeah.
bending. It's not
It's not quite done.
right.
The other way to tell is the way you can tell it's stiff. And it tastes like straw.
You can tell it's the way it bends.
All right, check it out.
Okay, let's see how this looks now.
Now that looks squiggly. Let me taste one. Oh, jeez.
It's perfect, and it's ready to go.
Al
out of the
dente?
water. It's al dente. If you don't know what al dente means, al dente refers to the teeth. Dente, dentist.
Right, I get it.
And so pasta, by right, should be chewy. You should be able to feel it with your teeth.
All right, let's
Okay. So let's move this
drain
and
it.
drain it in the colander.
Okay, noodles, pasta, macaroni, all fabulous food. Pour a little hot water in to heat up my serving plate. I get rid of the
That's
rest.
a good idea.
And you never rinse it, right?
You never rinse it unless you're going to shock it to make a pasta salad or for noodle soup.
And you need it cold or something.
That's right.
Okay. All right, there are many sauces you can add to this. Actually, my daughter loves basic butter, parsley, salt, and pepper. We'll
Okay.
make some marinara sauce
We
later.
will.
Okay, we're going to move from the top of the stove to the oven now. And I think, personally, one of the easiest things you can make, especially for company, is a roast. Because preparing it is really quick. You throw it in the oven, you forget about it, you've got plenty of time to do something else.
I think the most important principle to know about roasting is the smaller the size, the higher the temperature. The larger the roast, the lower the temperature.
All right, small
And
compared to what here?
Okay, so let's look at this. This originally was one roast, about a 20-pound prime rib.
And you'd call that large?
And I would call that a large roast, and I would, yes, cook this at 325. Now, if I was going to cook a roast this size, I would say 350. And today we're going to cook this single roast, and I would cook this at 375. The theory behind that is that as you're roasting, you want to have that crispy, delicious, caramelized outside to the roast, and you still want to keep it somewhat rare inside.
So if you cooked this at 325, it would get, by the time it got cooked, it
would not be crispy and caramelized on the outside. So we want to cook it a little hotter. Unless, of course, you wanted to cook it well done, then you could cook it at 325 if you wanted to cook it. Why you would want to cook it well done, I don't know. Today we're going to make a rub for this roast beef using fresh rosemary, and we pick the leaves off of that and chop them, and fresh thyme from the garden, and we have that also picked and chopped.
Do you use the stems like here on fresh thyme?
No,
you just take these little leaves off?
Yes, we pick the little leaves off the thyme, and then we save the stems for stocks and for our jus later. We can put the stems in that.
You need the patience of a saint.
A little bit of chopped garlic in this rub.
Okay.
And some cracked peppercorns.
Why cracked peppercorns?
Cracked peppercorn is a bigger size to the pepper, and it has a bigger flavor. Take the peppercorns, put them on a board, take a frying pan with a clean bottom, and just lean into it.
Great way to release your frustrations. There's a lot of that in cooking, you know?
Yes, very hands-on business, this cooking. Okay, then we take this cracked pepper, and you can smell it even from here, how good it smells. And we mix that with these other spices, too. And I'm going to put a little bit of salad oil.
It doesn't matter what kind?
It doesn't really matter for this. We just want a little moisture.
Just to make it moist?
Right.
So a tablespoon, maybe?
Mm-hmm. And we're going to put that on this roast here.
Shall I try?
Mix this rub up. Sure. And you can rub that all over the roast.
Okay, it's just barely moist. I get to see that now. So you mix this up. And I just press it in?
Yeah, push it right in and rub it all around.
All right.
And go all the way around.
This is great. It's like when you were a kid and working with mud pies.
Yeah. Now, another thing you can do with this rub is, if you have time, rub the roast down the day ahead and let that dry marinade really soak into the roast.
Now, when you do that, would you put it in a bag in the fridge, like a plastic bag, or what?
You could just rewrap it in the original butcher's paper that it came in, called peach paper. Now, before we do that, let's put some kosher salt on it, too.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
And we're going to salt the roast.
What do I do? Just
sprinkle it all over. And
a lot?
You can, sure, plenty, yep. And then turn it and rub it in a little bit. The butcher's paper that meat comes in breathes, and it allows the meat to stay dry, and that's important, much better than plastic for meats.
Okay, so you shouldn't use plastic. Right.
No.
No, but you know, a lot of grocery
if you were going to do this the day ahead, you would not put the salt on until you roast it.
Why is that?
Because the salt will start to cure the meat, and we don't want that to happen. We just want the flavor to go in. Now, before we put it into this roasting pan, we're going to add just a little bit of scraps of carrots and onions, and even a little garlic that we have here. And then we're going to put the roast on a rack.
Now, why did you do that anyway?
Okay, as the roast cooks, the fat's going to drip down on the vegetables, and the vegetables are going to caramelize and stick on the bottom of the pan. And later on, when we make the jus, we'll deglaze this pan like we did earlier when we were sautéing.
Okay.
And we'll make a delicious sauce to put on the roast beef.
Sounds
great. The reason we have it on the rack is so that the air can circulate around the roast as it's cooking and help it cook evenly.
Does it make it cook faster when you do that?
It gives it a little more time. It makes it cook more evenly.
I've never used a rack. I learned something there. Okay, I turned these ovens on for you. Now, what temperature did you decide?
375.
Okay. I turned it on 400, though, because my oven's 25 degrees off. Just one home cook to another. That's a tip. I'd spend money on a good thermometer. Check your oven.
90% of all the ovens in America are at least 25 degrees off.
Okay, let's do the lamb. What about this printing on here? Do we have to cut this off? I always cut this off.
No, not at all. That's a natural dye made from grape juice. And
Are you serious?
It's harmless. I don't like the way it looks either. On this piece, I trimmed off a little here where it didn't hurt. But I would never trim it where it would cut into the meat. It's totally harmless.
Also, Did you tie this up? I've never seen
I
it tied.
did. I added a few extra pieces of meat when I deboned this lamb, and your butcher can do this for you. And
Okay.
ask him to tie it and put a little extra meat around that and protects the bone and makes it
Okay.
cook more evenly.
Okay, lamb is an old salatich recipe, old family tradition
Okay.
here.
I'm sure a lot of families.
I suppose everybody's got their own recipe. We do garlic, salt, and pepper.
We're going to
How
do
about
garlic and salt and pepper on this. There's a lot of variations to do it, but the main thing is the studding of the lamb. You cut your garlic into slivers and you take your paring knife. What I do is put my finger on the knife so that I know how far I'm going to go in so it's not deeper than the garlic is.
Oh, that's a good
Put
idea.
it in there and stop, and then just insert that sliver of garlic right
Want to do
into
one on
the
this side,
lamb.
maybe get a little better.
Sure.
Or shall I try?
Yeah.
Do you mind?
Want to do that?
Okay. I never did that little inserting with the finger. But
And
that's
then
a
you
good
stop, right?
Idea. Yeah.
And then-
Sometimes I make it bigger.
Look at, slide that right in there.
Okay. All right, and we do maybe, I don't know.
I've done about 6 pieces on this side and about 5 on the other side.
You know, another thing that I've done, see, what do you think of this? Rubbing a little lemon on it.
I think it's a great idea. Lemon's a wonderful flavor with lamb. So is rosemary, so is parsley. There's a lot of great flavors. I even stud it sometimes with some Parmesan cheese.
Oh, do you?
Which is really
What do you do? Put that right where you had the garlic?
Right where with the garlic and cheese in there, and then let it sit for a day. So that's a great idea. Now let's put a little oil on it.
Oh, why
I
do you
put
do
a
that?
little fat on every roast to get it started, so that when it hits the oven, it starts to sear right away, and you get a nice crust that'll hold in
Oh.
all the juices.
Did you do that on the beef too? Oh, yeah,
I
that's
did,
right. It was in the
we had
marinade.
it in the rub.
That's
So
right, I
just
forgot.
a little bit, and we'll rub that, and then we'll put a little salt and pepper on this. If you'll do that for me,
Okay.
I'll get the pan ready.
And I know you always use kosher salt.
I always use
Because
kosher
it's
salt
rougher.
because it's more coarse and it cooks much
Coarse,
nicer.
better word.
And again, some vegetable scraps when we make the jus later on to go with the lamb. I even threw a couple whole heads of garlic in there.
Okay, and you want to throw the thermometer in, right?
Nope, not that thermometer.
Why?
No, these big old thermometers, I find them to be very inaccurate, and I see no point in putting a big hole in and letting it sit there for 2 hours.
So, how are we going to know?
My
Do you use
choice
this?
for the thermometer
I also use this.
is to use the smaller, more modern meat thermometer, and we use it right when we're ready to test it.
Okay.
There's so many variables, the shape of the meat, that no book and there's no set method that can make that meat come out perfectly. For
So a
instance,
little trial and error.
375, 10 pounds. So the important part is to test it.
You know what else is a good thing is to mark up your cookbook. You know, if you cook this at 375 for 2 hours and it wasn't done to what you wanted, write in that cookbook. That's what I do. Too
Definitely.
well done. Try
That's a
less
great
time.
thing to do, and that's a good thing to do, the cookbook.
Okay, let's put
Okay.
this in the oven and do the turkey. Another roast that can throw even the most stable person is the obligatory Thanksgiving Day turkey.
Okay.
Most people are petrified of this, so let's
right, and most people-
demystify it.
First thing you do is check. We already washed this turkey and we took the giblets out. Check the back and the front. And the liver is good to save for stuffing.
Which you cook for about 15
With
minutes,
these other
right? In
parts,
water.
we're going to put them in a little pot, some vegetable scraps that we've always saved around the house, and a little peppercorns, and we'll put just a little water in there to cover it and put it on a slow simmer.
Okay, I'll take
By the
care of
time
that
our
for you.
turkey's cooked, we'll have a little stock to make the gravy with.
All right, so I've covered it with water. Cool.
Yeah. Now the controversial part. You're not going to like me for saying this. I don't think stuffing is the best thing to do with
You're
a
right.
turkey.
I don't like you for saying this.
And nobody's going to like it.
My family would disown me.
Right.
Why?
and-
Why?
and
What's the point
I
of that?
say that, and I will say that I stuff turkeys on Thanksgiving too because it's traditional. But stuffing, especially bread stuffings, tend to draw some of the juice from
Really?
the turkey. So
didn't
the
know
one
that.
thing I will say, when you do use a bread stuffing, make it very moist.
So
Now,
in lieu of a stuffing, is
In
that
lieu
what
of a
this
stuffing, we took some herbs and some scraps of vegetables. Some people could even put an orange or lemon or whatever. And this, I also want you to think of this as poultry. This could be a chicken, but it's a big bird. And for roast chicken, you want to put some kind of aromats into the center
Why?
of the cavity to help give it flavor, to help it develop flavor.
Okay, now you say herbs. I mean, herbs is great for you,
Thyme,
but what?
thyme, rosemary, parsley,
Okay.
pepper, peppercorns.
Okay.
And what we do is season the inside of the cavity with salt.
My mother
touching
always
the
taught me
inside.
to rub the entire cavity with salt. She was
Yeah, that's
she
a
was
good
telling me
idea,
right,
too.
right? Okay.
Okay, and then we're just going to put a little bit of this aromatic vegetable stuffing in here.
You don't want all of it?
A little more. We can put a little in the back, too.
Oh, okay. I used up most of it. Here,
That's
I'll
fine.
steal
No,
some
that's
from
fine.
here.
Just a little bit here. Okay, now we're gonna truss this bird now.
Truss. Now there's a word for you.
And that's a technique that you will use on almost all roasts. And the idea of trussing, the reason that you do that is to push that breast up and to give that bird a nice shape. So
did you see what he just did? I didn't realize that. The point is to get the breast up like that?
Yeah, to push.
Why?
Yeah, to give the bird a nice shape when it's roasting.
Just for looks or for cooking?
Yeah, and it also protects it because you've got the legs closer and you're protecting this thin part of the breast.
All right,
so
let's
that
do
it
this.
cooks more evenly.
Is this a one-man job or a two-person job?
This is a one-man job. Here, take a piece of twine and come up over the legs and cross.
All right.
Tie that, then come around like this.
You see how that tucked in?
See how that breast plumped up a little bit?
Yeah.
Around like this.
You better turn this around. I know this makes it tough for you, but just so they can see.
So that they can see it. Why don't I just flip the bird right over?
Good idea.
Over, and then here's the neck, and you want to come under the neck, and at that point you can tie it off. And that's all there is to trussing a bird. And they make it look so complicated, but it's a real simple operation.
Well,
yeah,
so if you didn't do it just like that, it wouldn't have mattered.
Right.
Okay.
You're giving the bird some shape.
Now, do you ever tuck, fat under the skin? Would you do that?
Yeah, that's a nice method to do. You can take butter. Sometimes you can even, and with a chicken, you can do the same thing. You loosen the skin up with your fingers. Let me turn this a little bit. See how I can put my finger right in between the breast and the meat? And you can put butters in. You could also put even flavored butters. Like you can make a butter with peppercorns or with tarragon and put that inside there.
Now, do you rub anything on top of it? Salt, oil, butter?
I put salt and pepper on the turkey. For a change, we'll leave some herbs off. And I like to use some melted butter. So we just melted a little bit of butter.
Now, I've used hard butter and rubbed it on. I shouldn't do that?
You can do the same thing.
Same thing.
This just makes it a little easier to apply it.
Okay.
And let's put some salt and pepper on that.
So first the fat, so that the salt and pepper will stick.
Yeah.
And am I putting like the right amount?
Sure. I like to be generous with the seasoning. We'll get both sides.
We forgot the fat here.
Yeah.
I love getting my hands dirty. Brings out the kid in you, you know?
Okay.
Do you want pepper too?
Pepper, yep.
And again, we're using cracked pepper?
Yeah, we are.
All right.
You don't have to if you'd rather use the less coarse pepper.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, it looks so good, I must say.
Now we're going to put this right onto the rack.
Oh, here.
Again, up, air circulating
around. So you never put a roast in the bottom of a pan,
right.
Is that it?
And we've got some extra butter. We want to have extra fat. Turkey's a very lean roast.
My mother taught me to make a tent out of tin foil. See if I do it right. If I don't, tell me wrong. I just do that.
Yeah, just loosely cover it.
Now, if you find it starting to brown,
that'll keep it from browning up too much too early.
You could always do this, right?
In the middle of it. During the operation.
All right, let's bake it. Okay, is it soup yet? Or I should say, is it pot roast yet?
Okay, let's just take a look at these vegetables. They look like they're cooked.
Should we fork it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Boy, it breaks right apart.
Yeah, they're very tender.
They're definitely done.
Okay, and we're going to test for the meat, for the doneness for the meat, we're going to test the same way by sticking a fork in. And now, if the fork just slides out easily, like it is, the meat is tender. If the meat wasn't cooked, the fork would have really stuck in there, and it would have been hard to get it out.
All right, let's set it aside.
So this pot roast is finished, and we can take it.
And we'll carve it against the grain, another critical against the grain cut. Smells in here overwhelming. Let's check the beef.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Looking good.
All right, so we're going to test this little guy for doneness. And you're going to show us how we do that.
Right. Okay, well, what we want to know is what is the temperature of this meat in the center of the meat. So the first thing we want to find out is the center. And an easy way, obviously here we know where the center is here. And here, this is the center. So I'm going to mark it with my thumb, and then I'm going to push that thermometer right down so that the tip of the thermometer is in the center. And we're going to wait and give it about at least 30 seconds to see what temperature it reaches.
And we want to remember that this piece of meat and all meat, right, continues to cook after it comes out of the oven.
And that's called carryover cooking. And all meats cook after they come out of the oven.
How much?
A roast like this will carry over about 15 degrees. and a larger roast will carry as high as 25 or 30 degrees.
So if it's been in the oven like an hour, it'll be about 15 degrees more. It's going to cook when it comes out.
Right now we're at about 115 degrees here, and it's going to carry another 15, which is going to be a beautiful medium rare when it's done.
Can we slice it now?
No, we have to let it rest. And
what's the point of that? I see that in all cookbooks. Why is that?
Let's explain. As the roast is in the oven, the heat is pushing the juices of the roast into the center. If I cut this meat right now while it's really hot, you're going to see the blood just pour out of this meat. You see the blood running out of that meat like that?
And we don't want it to do that.
And that's what you don't want to happen. You want this meat to sit and rest and let the blood go back evenly, and you're going to have, instead of, right now it's very rare in the center and very well done on the outsides, it's just going to even up, and you're going to have a nice, beautiful pink slab of meat. Oh, it does even out. Yes.
My mom used to tell me to find out if a turkey's done, you shake a leg, but I can tell with all your equipment you're about to do something more sophisticated.
Well, it's not very sophisticated, but basically, if the thigh of the turkey's done, the breast is done.
Okay.
So we don't need a meat thermometer to test the two different parts.
So she was right when she said shake a leg. We were shaking the thigh.
That tells a little bit, but she is testing that. What I'm going to do is poke in here, the thickest part of the turkey. And when those juices run clear, then you know it's done.
And they are.
And they are. They're running very clear. So
perfect.
The turkey is finished.
Okay, you want to put it on this platter?
Yep, and we'll just pick it up.
So we'll just let this sit for, what, 20 minutes or so?
Yes, at least 20 minutes resting before we carve it.
Another cooking technique involving your oven is the broiler, which is especially good for getting things brown and crispy.
For browning and for making things nice and crispy.
Like described.
Yes, and we're going to cook some Boston scrod today. Very simply, we just take the scrod fillet, skin on, little salt and pepper.
You leave skin on with fish almost always, don't you?
It depends on the fish, but so far we have used a lot of fish with the skin on. With the scrod, it's especially important, and I'll point that out later when we get under the broiler.
Alrighty.
I'm dipping it in a little bit of melted butter here, and then into some fresh white breadcrumbs that we made.
With parsley?
And we put some fresh parsley in there, too.
And skin up as you put it on the pan.
Okay, do you want to do that one?
Sure, and I noticed that you did not grease your pan because you have enough butter.
I didn't, because it's buttery enough.
I guess so. Okay.
Yeah, I'll give a little extra on there. Okay, great.
All right.
Okay, now we're going to take this and go right under the broiler. Now, for cooking fish, unlike if you were cooking some pieces of meat, we're going to use a middle rack here, so it's not under real intense heat. It's under pretty intense heat already, and we leave the door cracked and allow that to sit for a few minutes. Okay, well, about 4 minutes have gone by now, and
ooh, looks pretty good.
These are starting to get nice and crispy golden brown on one side, so it's time to flip them. And I'm going to just see they didn't stick at all because it had so much butter. And then I flip all 4 pieces of these fish, and I'm just going to sprinkle a little more bread on top. And Nat, would you mind drizzling a little butter on top of that for me?
Do you ever put a little extra lemon on or anything?
No, we would serve the lemon afterward, but the butter will keep it crisp, the butter and the crumbs, and the lemon would make it soggy.
Do you ever substitute margarine, or is there just not the right flavor?
No, I never use margarine on anything. I don't. To me, margarine is just, it's fake butter made with vegetable oil, and I would rather just have the vegetable oil.
Smells
good.
Good.
So the fish is looking really nice now, and you've got a golden brown crust. It's very crisp.
Looks
and delicious. I can tell just from touching the fish that it's set up and it's fully cooked. And that to me is what the broiler is best for. Right now I'm going to take this shelf and I'm going to raise it up one. And down here below we have some scallop potatoes cooking. And these potatoes are cooked all the way through. You can see they're bubbling. And I had just tested them a minute ago and they were cooked. But I'm really not happy with that presentation.
They're not brown.
Right.
Let me get this for you.
Now, this is where using your broiler can really be tremendous. I'm going to stick these potatoes under the broiler. And I'm just going to close it up, and we're going to wait a minute or two. We'll see how fast it goes. Don't walk away from this at this point, especially when you're doing it with cream, because it could go very fast.
Boy, they're really bubbling.
They're bubbling and they are looking good.
And that is a broiler at its best.
I'll say.
Man, what a fire! Those are not normal charcoal briquettes.
No, this is wood charcoal. I'm going to show you how I build that fire. Start with this. It's called a chimney. And put 1 piece, 2 pieces, exactly 2 pieces of newspaper in there.
Go over the Herald.
Fill it right to the top with the charcoal.
Are these hotter than the briquettes I know?
They tend to burn very hot and very fast. So
Good.
They burn a little quicker than the briquettes do.
Okay.
And then we just light it from the bottom here.
And how long does that take then?
And in about 15 minutes, you got a full-blown fire.
Beautiful. Without any chemicals.
And the benefit of using this chimney instead of the thing is that you don't get that terrible flavor from the charcoal lighter fluid.
Jasper, why coals on only half the grill?
We have some space here where there's no coals under it, and a lot of grilling is not done directly over the coals. It's done just a little bit away from it. So the bigger the grill, the more options we have. And we'll just clean this up. Every grill should be cleaned up very well. And then I have some oil on this rag, and I'm just oiling these up.
Just vegetable oil?
Just vegetable oil. Now, we don't always have to cook meats on the grill. We could cook some vegetables on here, too. We'll just brush a little olive oil on them.
Is that all that's on?
That's all, and then just put
This
them...
way, flip
yep,
it?
Flip it, yep.
Right over the coals? Or
Right
not?
over. And I'm just getting a few other veggies ready. We have some potatoes, a little salt and pepper.
And is the oil for flavor as well as to keep it from sticking?
In this case, I would say yes. With the eggplant and the zucchini, some of the oil gets absorbed, so I'm using olive oil, which is really nice.
Tastes better.
Some potatoes are really great on the grill.
I never would have thought of that. You know, I don't think I've ever done vegetables on the grill.
Leeks are wonderful on the grill, whole leeks. Onions, of course, are always good.
Now, I noticed some of these are going away off the coals.
Yeah, and we'll move them around.
You need to use your creativity.
You want to
here.
use creativity and options. These
5
vegetables
minutes?
will only take a few minutes to cook. The eggplant will take 5. Almost all of them will cook in 5. And some of them, like the leeks, we'll move them back and let them just cook a little slower. So as these ones that are starting to cook move, I'm going to move them off a little bit into a slower spot. And move these other ones onto a little higher heat here.
I can help you out. Now, you don't continue to baste these, right? The oil was enough?
No, just brush them once, and then you can just flip them.
And how about these potatoes? Are these partially cooked? Did you blanch them?
We blanch the potatoes. Let me just flip them. So they're starting. So by the time you color them, they're done, and they're ready to eat. Now, if you don't want to do that and just cut them raw, you can mark them on the grill. Then you want to move them into a slower spot and let them go for about 15 or 20 more minutes. Okay, and then with the peppers, what you want to do is let them char just a little bit, because you don't want them to be all burnt up.
Yep.
And then we'll move them onto a little slower spot and let them kind of cook, and they'll get sweet and soft.
These look ready to eat. What do you think?
Yeah, they sure are.
These zucchinis are fab.
I love the leeks.
Leeks? I've never had the leeks. I can't wait to taste them. Okay, we've got the veggies. How about a little shrimp and swordfish?
Oh,
Man,
boy,
these look
that'd
good.
be great. Okay, I'm going to season these up. The shrimp, we made the marinade earlier.
Right. Marinades, I've learned, are not all the same. They tenderize, preserve, and flavor, and there's a difference. Just happen to have Jasper's soy sauce recipe handy here. I've been using this for ages.
The thing that you want to be careful of with a soy-based or teriyaki-style marinade is the fact that, yes, it tenderizes the food, but it can go past that and it can literally start cooking the foods.
So if it says...
So if the recipe says 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 2 hours, whatever the recipe says, pay attention to that closely, because the author probably knew what they were talking about.
More is not better.
No, more time is not necessarily better.
So soy sauce marinades actually cook the food, you could say it that way.
They can cook the foods, that's true. But they also tenderize, and they certainly add a lot of flavor. Another marinade that is similar to this are the acid-based, vinegar, lemony type of marinades that you might see with lamb or other tougher meats.
Unlike the oil-based
Third
ones.
type of recipe, an oil-based recipe, and this is a very loose recipe that calls for some olive oil. I'm going to mix it right into this cup. And we're going to pour this over shrimp and grill them at some point. A little bit of garlic, a little bit of basil, fresh basil, You could have some thyme in this recipe too. Some bay leaves, and for this I would crack them up.
I'm beginning to see what your favorite herbs are.
Yes. And on this swordfish, which is really jumbo-sized swordfish, we're just putting a little oil, salt, and pepper on it. We can do the other side when it's on the grill.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to flip this. That is a big steak. That's for Fred Flintstone swordfish steak.
I guess so. Or a Jasper White-sized steak.
There you go. Okay. Not on the fire again, folks. Just directly off the fire. Okay, we can cook some real fast.
Okay, that's a real hot fire.
And these are going to take about 20 seconds on each side. These are going to be so delicious.
Are they going to burn up with all this flame?
No, they'll be fine.
Should we put the lid on or anything?
No.
Call the fire department?
No, they'll be fine. Don't get nervous.
Wow, they turn pink quick.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Quickly. Mmm.
We'll move them off to the side a little bit here. But the shrimp cook quickly, so you want to cook them on a high heat. Again, the smaller, the hotter you like to cook them. Right? Just like everything else we cook.
Just like what you said in the kitchen. Yeah.
It really is
now,
wonderful.
on the swordfish that's that thick, that looks to me like more than 1.5 inches even. How long does that take?
Well, again, it takes...
I know it varies.
Right, and it takes according to the fire, but it's going to take about 8 minutes on each side, but probably about 15 minutes.
And you don't cover this? You don't put a lid on this?
No, we don't need to
grill?
cover this.
You do not?
Not with seafood. We're gonna, when we cook some meats, we're going to cover the grill.
Okay.
But most of the seafood is very quick, pretty fast cooking.
What's the principle behind that? I mean, why wouldn't you cover like a thick piece of swordfish like that?
Well, I think with fish, you want to minimize the smoky flavor so you can really taste the seafood.
Okay, that's right.
And whereas with meat, sometimes the smoke really enhances the flavor of it.
I'll hold this and... Those look, is that done?
Yeah, they're done.
And you know these are done when they turn pink.
All right, now I'd say by now we can flip the swordfish over. Or not even flip it, but we can take a look at it and see how it's cooking. Mm-hmm. Okay?
All right.
Those are some great shrimp.
You want those tongs?
No, these are fine. This is fine.
Okay.
Just going to look and see. Ooh, it's beautiful golden brown. So I'm going to turn it this way so it has marks going both ways. It's going to make it look very, very nice when it's done.
Aren't you clever? Only a chef would think of that.
Okay. Right, now we're going to flip them. Beautiful sword.
Those look fab. Look at this. Wow,
Yikes.
perfect.
Yeah,
perfect. Okay, we've got a little bluefish in a something here. What do you call this thing? Hot dog rack? Fish rack?
It's a fish rack now. We've decided we're going to call this a fish rack.
Why not? It's got fish in it.
And what we did with this is we took a sauce aioli, which is a garlicky mayonnaise, and we rubbed that fish all around with that garlic mayonnaise, and then we put it into this rack, and now we just let it go over these.
So this is tilted here. It's not really sitting on the grate.
No, it's not.
Okay?
It's not directly on the
It's not supposed to
fire, and it doesn't need to be. In fact, we might move it around a little bit while it's cooking.
And how long might that take?
This is only going to take about 3 minutes on each side would be my guess, maybe a little longer. And the one thing about bluefish and the aioli combination is that you have a fish that's really hearty in flavor. You know, much more flavorful, let's say, than the sword or sole or flounder.
Right.
And it can really stand up to some strong flavors, and that's why I chose the garlic mayonnaise. Okay. The other fish that you can do in this rack are whole small fish like trout, mackerel. You can cook the whole fish, put them inside this rack.
It's perfect, and they don't fall apart. I love this.
And they don't fall apart. I just want to take a peek and see how this is doing.
Ooh, look
see,
at
it's
this,
just starting to brown
got.
already. Okay.
Does that look done on that side?
No, it's not quite done, but we can flip it back and forth too. This is done. Let's take it off.
Okay. And I see you have a hot fire.
Okay, now we're going to take the flank steak. And unlike some of the things that I've been cooking away from the fire, I'm going to put this baby right on top, right over those coals.
And the purpose of that?
The reason we're doing that is we have a steak that's about 3/4 of an inch thick, and I want to cook it rare. And I don't want to cook it on a slow heat. I want to cook it on a really high heat.
Okay,
and,
makes sense.
The flank steak, if it's not cooked rare and if it's not sliced the right way, it can be really chewy and tough. What we did with this flank steak is we put it in the soy marinade with ginger and all these other great things.
So what do you think? A couple minutes on a side?
About 2 minutes on each side on a very high heat, and that's it. And that's rare. And we don't want it to be any more than rare.
Okay. So you can have good steak without paying a fortune, huh? Looks like a fan.
This steak is definitely ready. Okay.
How do you know?
How do I know?
Oh, I can tell by my finger.
Yes.
Silly question.
Well, it's got to be so rare that the only problem would be that it's cooked too much, not that it's undercooked enough.
How about chicken? Do we do that directly over the grills?
Right.
Or?
Well, no, it's a little hot for that, so we're going to cook it right on the side, though, where it's hot enough to sear it. And I've got a little oil and salt and pepper on this chicken breast.
Okay.
I'm going to sear it to seal in the juices.
Any kind of oil will do, right?
Any old kind of oil will do.
So it's right along the edge of the coals.
Right on the edge.
Just like
there.
you did the swordfish.
Skin side down first, and we're going to let that sear for a minute and crisp up a little bit.
Why didn't you use the barbecue sauce right off the bat?
Most of the barbecue sauces have a lot of sugar in them.
Right.
And so if you start the chicken off with the barbecue sauce on it, it's really going to stick a lot to the grill because the sugar is going to burn right onto those coals.
Okay, makes sense. See, but that's the beauty of this. You just move it over hotter coals if you don't think it's searing fast enough, right?
Let's see how these other ones are doing. Just a little hotter here. Just move it up a little more.
So the other advantage to building a fire like this that I can see is that you don't have to worry so much that you have just the right amount of coals at just the right temperature because you can move it around.
You could even just take this and spin the whole thing around if you had a fire going, let's say, and you wanted to get it all off the fire.
Now you don't find they get too dry by searing them, huh?
Oh no, it's just the opposite. This is going to hold the juices into the chicken. Now we've got these chickens seared on both sides. And we're going to move it over here to a little lower heat.
Basically, I see you moving them off the coals.
Off the coals completely, not even close to them. Where they're going to get a nice low heat. And at this point, we're going to start lathering them up with this barbecue sauce. This is a great barbecue sauce.
Is it worth it even to make your own sauce? There's so many bottled sauces now.
Well, there's some good bottled ones out there, and there's some good homemade recipes too. So,
depends on how much time you've got, huh?
It depends on your time. But there are quite a few good ones out there. I'm going to just turn this and get this whole thing lathered up with the sauce.
Smells great. Smoky.
Okay, and smoky, and that's the reason why we're going to cover them now.
Now,
put that lid right over this whole thing and let them cook real slowly.
All right. Do I leave these air holes open?
No, let's just leave it cracked just a little bit. And if you're wondering what these air holes are, they control the amount of heat. So the more air you have coming through, the hotter your fire. This will slow your fire down considerably. And you can see already that we've slowed things down. You can see the smoke coming out. And you've probably got a lot of smoke building up in here. And that's what we want. We want that nice smoky barbecue chicken flavor. Turkey is finished.
Okay, you want to put it on this platter?
Yep, and we'll just pick it up.
Lordy, you don't use anything to protect your hands? Man.
My hands are made out of asbestos.
I guess they are.
Okay, now we're going to make the gravy for the turkey. Now, the first thing I do is size up how much fat was in this pan, and I used a moderate amount of fat when I started this out. And so I don't think there's too much fat. If I used a lot of fat when I was basting it, I would pour off some of what I would consider excess fat.
Okay.
So I want to see maybe 3 tablespoons of fat in here. We just put this onto a low heat, and we're going to let this just evaporate for a minute, some of the excess liquid that's in there now. Okay, now we're going to add a little bit of flour. And basically what we're doing is, in a very rough way, is we're making a roux by combining fat and flour.
Is that what roux means?
And that's what a roux is. It's
fat and flour.
A combination of fat and flour that's cooked slowly. And we're stirring this.
And you don't have to worry about it getting all glommed up?
Not at all. As soon as we add our liquid, it's going to just going to come together. And what we're doing as we're cooking this, we're cooking some of the that real floury taste out of the gravy, so that when we make the gravy, it's not going to be at all pasty. It's going to have the texture of a really nice sauce. And
it's cooking it with the fat and all of this. It gets rid of that pasty taste. Now, how did you know how much flour to put in? It looked like a couple tablespoons.
Yeah, I put it about 3 tablespoons in. In fact, I think I'm going to put just a hair more in here.
And the way you know you have enough is when it's thick, right?
Yeah, it'll tighten up. And again, this is the kind of thing where, you know, if you're using any kind of recipe at all, it'll probably give you some proportions. But for most turkeys, I think you'll find 6 teaspoons of fat and 6 teaspoons of flour will
Now, is that burning or that's okay?
No, that's not burning. That already was burnt on there.
And that's okay?
Yep,
It's
this
not
is
gonna
all
taste
fine.
burnt.
No. And now we're going to start adding some liquid to this.
Okay. And you want the broth that we
I'm going
cooked
to take the
giblets
broth
and-
that we made, cook the giblets and stuff in, and add this to it. I'm not really worried about what's in here.
What's in, oh, okay.
About this, if a little of this carrot or whatever fell in, because it's going to get strained later on.
Okay, I'll get rid of this. So we don't need this anymore,
We don't
right?
need that anymore.
All right. You're dangerous, you know that?
I'm sorry. I am dangerous. You can see that rich color of this
Yes,
gravy, and it's going to
indeed.
have a really...
Now, how do you know if it's too thick or too thin here?
Well, we don't know yet because it hasn't even fully combined yet,
all
the
right.
flour and the starch. It's a little thick.
But that
We're
looks right for this point.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to add a little more liquid to this eventually.
So since we're out of broth, shall I get you some water?
Some water would be fine, or if we had some chicken stock, that would be fine. But, you know,
Well, through the magic of good preparation,
Right,
we happen to
yeah.
have some chicken stock handy.
go ahead.
Tell me
pour
when.
about it. That's enough for now. That's about all it needed.
No more?
No more. And we'll keep it handy, and later, as we're going to let this cook. Now, at this point, we did this as soon as the turkey came out.
Right.
The turkey's going to rest for 20 minutes, and the best thing we can do is just let this simmer slowly for 20 minutes. Okay, now this is cooked for 20 minutes now, and I'd say it's nice and ready, and I'm tasting it.
I taste.
It tastes really rich,
Perfect.
delicious. It's got beautiful color.
Now, if it needed salt or pepper, you'd add it here.
I would add it here. As far as the
Now, how about the thickness?
thickness goes,
Is this about right?
it's just about right.
Now, we should say that during this 20 minutes that this has been cooking, we've probably added at least a pint or more of
Yeah,
chicken
a few
broth.
cups of
Because it
chicken
tends to
broth.
get thick as it's sitting here,
does,
so
yeah.
don't be nervous about that. Just keep adding broth or
Right.
water.
Okay, so let's
Strain it?
Let's strain it. Okay. Strain it right into there.
And all these black things are
Now,
the
all these little
caramelized
black
onions, right?
spots are the onions that caramelize, and contrary to what you think might make it taste bitter, they actually add a real sweetness to the gravy. So, just give it a little shake, and it'll just strain right through. Okay, now when we were cooking the stock, we cooked some giblets, and we took the giblets and chopped them up, and we're going to dump those right in there and stir that in.
Alrighty.
And now we'll test it one more time.
I think it's delicious.
That's great pan gravy.
I always thought Au Jus was nothing more than the natural juice from the meat, but obviously there's a little more to it.
Well, it could be the pan juices combined. You'd want to put them in there, but what we did is we took all those drippings from the pan and all the vegetables we put in here, and I'm adding a little red wine, which is optional, but I like the flavor of the red wine with the beef.
You could
And
use
we're-
water, could you?
You could use just plain water, and we're deglazing this. And see, I take the spatula, and I'm scraping every bit of this good stuff off of here.
Just like we did in the skillet with sauteing.
Exactly. And I'm deglazing this pan completely.
Jeez,
I'm
what a
also
slog!
making a little
Here we
mess
go.
too.
You got a rag
And I'm
over there.
adding a little beef stock to this also. Okay.
Now, if you don't have beef stock, could you just do water and bouillon
You
or
could
something?
do water. You could add a bouillon cube. if
Wouldn't
you
taste
wanted
as
to.
good, though.
No, it always has that funny taste that they have. I'm going to move this right into a
Thanks.
sauce pot. Okay, and everything.
Wow, that deglazed fast.
It only takes a second when that pan is hot. Okay, now that's going to be our jus, and we're going to put this on the heat, and we're going to allow this to simmer for about 20 minutes or so. Now, what's important to note here is that I didn't take any of the grease off. I didn't take any of the vegetables out. I'm going to cook it all with the fat and everything.
Okay.
After it's done, I'm going to strain it, and at that point, I'm going to degrease it after it's strained, and I'm going to season it up with a little salt and pepper, and we're done. Okay, I'm going to show you 2 ways to carve prime rib. This prime rib of beef. And also show you a little bit about a carving knife. And this is a slicer, and it has a very long blade. And there's a reason for the long blade, is that is that you want to, when you carve something, you want to pull it in one straight motion. On the prime rib, some people, if you want to carve a slice with the bone, let's see, I'll start here with the back of my knife, and then I'll just come right through this piece, and I've got this gorgeous,
nice and rare.
Nice, you know, rare to medium rare prime rib.
With the bone.
Okay, and that's a nice slice on the bone. Now the way you'd probably do it at home is you take it right off this bone and just follow the bone, keep your knife on the bone, follow and put that roast right on the table. And then you do nice thin slices of the roast. Okay?
Ooh, that looks great.
And that's all there is to it. Okay?
Great. Anyone who has ever been embarrassed at the Thanksgiving table because they couldn't carve in front of 20 relatives is going to love this. Go to it.
And of course, they always give the turkey to the one person who doesn't know how to cook, usually, in the family.
Or carve. I think
Okay.
carving this is difficult.
Yes, it is, but I'm going to show you some nice, easy ways, tricks to do it.
All right, we get rid of the
I'm
string.
going to remove this
Trussing.
string completely.
Yes.
And we'll put the turkey on the board. First thing I'm going to do is take the drumstick off right away in one shot. And that bone just, you can just see where it lifts. You just lift it and carve that bone right off. Okay? That gives me a little space to work there. The same thing with this wing tip. I'll just pull this wing right off. Okay. Don't be afraid to use your hands a little bit. And again, with the thigh, just loosen it up in here, and then give it a little snap. Did you hear that
I heard
snap?
it.
And then
It
just trim
sounds
that
like me in the
bone
morning.
right off. Now we can come back and carve this thigh meat up a little later.
Okay.
Now on the breast, there's two ways to handle this breast, and one would be the old-fashioned, you know, dad at the table trying to carve. And you
Wait,
just-
don't make light of him or her, you know, just
with
do
the
this for
electric
us.
knife.
Forget the electric knife,
Okay.
right?
Forget the electric knife. And nice thin slices off the breast. And again, use that carving knife to try to go in one motion and take that off in one shot. Now I want to show you another way that this can be done. Again, I'll move this from this side. And in this case, I'm just going to work real quickly so we don't spend a lot of time showing you the same thing twice.
I know she switched knives there to that little guy.
To the boning knife, yeah. And you should
Okay.
have a boning knife handy for this. Then loosen up the thigh again. Crack it. And get it out of your way. Okay, now we are not at the table now, but we are in the kitchen alone. We have a lot of people that want to be fed, and we want to get the turkey out as nicely and quickly as possible. We cut right here along this breastbone,
Just the way you bone that chicken.
just like I boned the chicken. I'm going to turn it real quickly and loosen it here. I take that whole breast off in one slice with very little waste, and we can come back and take some of that off. And I lay it flat on my cutting board. And look at these beautiful, perfect, juicy slices of turkey.
That is the better way to do it.
It's very quick.
Okay, I
And-
say parade the turkey in front of the guests, bring it back to the kitchen, right?
I think that's a good way for most people to try it. Okay, and see how juicy that turkey
That looks
came
much
out.
better than that thin slicing.
Now, if
Let's
we
do
want
that.
to do the thigh, we just have one little bone here, so we just kind of just take the boning knife and just take that bone right out.
You do have to do this in the kitchen, I'm sorry.
Yes.
How could you possibly
Okay,
do
and then you have this delicious dark meat, which is my favorite, and you just do the same thing. Nice, quick slices.
And I notice
There's the thigh sliced up beautifully.
and you slice that meat perpendicular to the
Straight down,
counter,
yep.
straight down. Okay, now for my favorite meat, lamb, which presents, I think, quite a challenge since there's that leg bone running right through here. So
Yeah, it's-
I'm all ears on this one.
Okay, it's not hard, but like anything else, if you understand where the bones are, it makes it a lot easier. So we'll start by snipping these strings,
Okay,
and we'll just pull all this string off of this lamb.
can I help?
You can help me.
All right.
Okay, tremendous. Stick it there. And we'll put it up here. Now, there's two ways to carve the lamb. Just like when we carve the turkey, I'm going to show you the family home style, and then I'm going to show you another way that works very well. this is the lamb is upside down now, holding like this. This is the shank here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the shank right off and get it out of our way. A lot of people love to eat this. It's very gelatinous and chewy, and
It's delicious.
it has a great flavor, very great flavor.
So don't throw it away.
So don't throw it away, and offer it to whoever might want it.
Okay.
Now, let me just get this whole thing cleared up here.
All right, so you're removing this
All this
the
shank
whole
meat.
shank.
Okay, now we're looking at the leg, and we've got this big juicy part here. Now, the traditional way to carve the lamb is to carve it in towards the bone. The bone pretty much goes like this. You'll
So
see
right
it goes
off
in
the
here
shank.
and then bends down.
Okay.
So
If I can remember that.
what we do is we start here with pretty much with whole slices. Okay, and we have these beautiful slices of lamb. And when we get just a little bit further into it, I'm going to start angling the knife. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one cut from here and then one cut from here.
And
go
alternate?
back and forth all the way down,
Aha.
all the way down the lamb. So one case, and here you can really see the motion of that carving knife with that big long start at the bottom, and let the knife do all the work. Not sawing back and forth, but just one or two nice motions back and forth.
You really
So that's
see
the way.
how-
Boom, boom, back and forth, all the way down the leg. Then you have another chunk of meat here, which you deal with later.
Do a couple
No.
more. Do you mind?
I don't mind.
Okay, so it's basically, again,
Carving it into the
Horizontal,
bone.
all right.
Your hand is safe as long as you're on the bone, because remember, the knife is going to stop when it hits the bone.
all right.
And now as we get into it, you'll see that the meat gets more pink, more medium rare. We're still into the shank, and you can still see that gelatinous meat. Okay.
Quick look at what that's looking like there. Can you see that? Okay.
Like the turkey, we were standing at the table carving the meat. It's not that hard to do, but there's even an easier way to do
This is,
do it.
you mean if we were at the table? Or no, if
This
we were
is
in the
now
kitchen?
we're in the kitchen.
Now we're in the kitchen.
And you've got 10 hungry people at the table. And this leg of lamb, that's the most it'll feed, is about 10. What we do is we take this whole piece right off, right down to this bone, which you see sticking out here.
Oh, yes, I see it.
Take that off in one shot.
Can you see that bone? That nub?
Yeah, that's the knuckle there. And then we come along here, and we take this piece off, this whole piece, in one shot.
Wow.
And then we're going to get one more little piece of lamb.
Oh, wow.
And I'm cutting around the knuckle here. And this is just a
so
small
much
piece
easier.
of boneless lamb here. And this we can mix in or whatever. And so you have your shank bone. You can save that. You can make Scotch broth. Okay, so now we've got 3 pieces. This is this top part, which is really the prime cut of the leg of lamb.
You cut it in half.
Cut it in half,
Lay it flat, lay
Lay
it on
it
the flat
down.
side.
and then just start slicing. And see how uniform and beautiful those pieces are compared to trying to carve it standing up.
And you leave those garlic pieces in that we
I
put
leave
in.
them in, sure. This piece is a little different in shape. As you can see, this is the same as that. You just put it down and slice it. This piece is a little different in shape. Just please look and see which way the grain is going.
Meaning
you can
what?
See
Which
here
way the lines go? That's
which
the
way
grain?
the lines go in the meat. And just you want to carve across them, not with them.
Okay, across the grain.
Right. So, and you can see when you cut here, you see lots of little lines, no big long lines.
Show me it wrong.
I don't know if it'll show, but I'll try.
Okay.
Let me take one piece off. Tough piece of skin there. You can see the lines are kind of going the same way.
Yep.
It's going to
Can
be.
you- can you make
it's not
this
going to
out?
make a huge difference
So
on
we've got-
lamb.
So we've got lines going this
Right.
way. All right.
It's not going to make a huge
That's wrong.
difference, but it's going to be a little more tender here. Later on, when we slice flank steaks, it makes a tremendous difference on the way you slice it. On lamb, it's a little less important, and that's it.
That's
you can,
it.
Basically, you can cut up this whole leg of lamb in 5 minutes versus spending 20
I like
minutes
it.
doing it that way.
I'm for carving in the kitchen.
Okay. Remember earlier we talked about the grain and meat, and on this steak you can clearly see the direction of the grain as it goes
Yes?
along like that. Now, not only do we want to cut against the grain, across it, but we also want to take it on a very wide bias. So let me just start here.
Oh, wow. Almost
See how-
horizontal.
Almost horizontal. And very, as thin as you can make it. And you can see, not only, we're talking about a tough piece of meat, if it was really tough, it wouldn't be almost falling apart like that is there. And this is just really special.
Wow. I would never have known to cut it on that angle. Yep. Can I try that?
This principle also applies to skirt steak as well as flank steak. There you go. Try it.
It's tender. That's fabulous. So you can get an inexpensive piece of meat and have it be just as tender as something more expensive.
That's right.
Aha! Finally ready to eat this guy. Probably need a fork, huh? Now, the trick on this thing, again, if I recall what you said before, was the way you cut it, because this is a less expensive cut of meat. It's a little, could be a little tougher.
It could be a little more tender, but we've braised it, so it's not as crucial as it is with the flank steak, but you want to try to find the grain. So you look around the meat.
Sometimes that's hard.
And sometimes it's hard. In some pieces, the grain will actually literally change. Because it's a connecting, two muscles connecting. So hopefully you can see that the grain here is running in this direction.
Okay.
Straight across. So I'm going to want to carve this in this direction.
All right.
Okay.
And you tend to cut this kind of meat thin, don't you?
Yeah. We try to cut it as thin as we can and have it hold together. Again, because it's not the juiciest meat. It's been braised for a long time.
And that's how it should look. Can you see this? When it's against the grain?
Yes.
You don't see the lines.
You don't see any long lines.
Got a little parsley there? Okay. I remember when I used to come home from school, my mother would always have a pot of this on for me because it was my favorite.
And that's dinner.
Now to unlock some basic secrets of baking. When we were at the stove, we added a pinch of that, a handful of that. It didn't matter, really. You could be more creative. But when you get to baking, you do have to be more exact. You do have to measure.
You do. You have to be precise. In fact, in professional baking, we call recipes formulas. And just for that reason, and we use measurement by weight, not by volume.
Okay, some things are pretty obvious if you're going to measure. We picked out a few things that you might get stuck on just so that you won't. For example, something easy would be sugar. You know, you need a half a cup of sugar, you take a half a cup, but you need to have a level half a cup. So take the back of a knife and you've got a half a cup. Something you might need to know is in brown sugar, you have to pack it. You know, if you just did that and you tried to level it off, you would not have an exact half a cup. You have to take brown sugar, use your fingers and push it down. You pound it, pile it up, use your fingers like that, and now you've got a half a cup of brown sugar. That's exact. In the case of flour, I think one of the easiest things to do, so you could weigh it as Jasper suggests, and if you have a little scale, that's the most accurate. Right. But an easy way that you come real close is put some air in your flour, like so. So just stir it a little bit. Let's say you want a cup of flour. You dip this cup in, overfill it, tap it to make sure there are no air holes, and level it. And you've got a pretty exact cup of flour. How about baking soda and baking powder? Again, we need to be exact.
We do.
Level it. You can use the top of the box if you want. In the case of baking powder, same deal. Level it. That's cool.
And for liquids, these measures enable us to look in from the side and see that we can pour precisely what we want for measuring. We also have an option for metric on most of these liquid measures, and we also don't have to spill it when we move it around. Another thing to note is the size of the eggs. If you, for some reason, have small eggs, probably 9 out of 10 recipes are talking about large or extra large eggs when they don't specify. I think it's good when cookbooks do specify, but they don't always. Stick with large or extra large eggs.
So if it calls for 4 large, would you throw in 5 small or medium?
I would.
Okay. Beat, blend, whip, whisk, fold, knead, puree. All these terms refer to combining ingredients. How do you know which one to use? Well, ask yourself, why am I doing this? To add air, or to mix so thoroughly I can't distinguish one ingredient from the other? Let's start with eggs and sugar, and beat. The sugar and the eggs will become one.
So true, grasshopper. For Chinese sponge cake, you would allow that to beat for over an hour.
No kidding.
Yeah. For American sponge cake, you would beat that at least 15 minutes.
So when the recipe says beat for 15 minutes, they mean beat for 15 minutes?
They mean beat for 15 minutes.
You can't cheat and do 5?
No, you can't.
Now, if you do cheat, what are you doing yourself? What are you doing in your recipe?
What are you doing to the recipe? You're probably not giving it a sturdy enough base. So let's say if you're going to make a cake, it might not rise as high.
Aha. Now, we go from beating to stirring.
We're going to add some dry ingredients here.
As you would with cookies.
Let's say, for a cookie dough.
Okay. And you could do that on a low speed on your mixer. But
And stirring simply refers to a somewhat gentle process where we're just using a spoon and incorporating the ingredients without kneading or any other thing. Not quite as gentle as folding, but we're just incorporating the two in an easy way.
the point being to mix the two ingredients, period.
Period.
Now sometimes the recipe will say whip or whisk. What's the difference between that and beating? Incorporating air.
And we'll demonstrate that by whipping some cream right now. And I'm going to do this by hand because I think you'll be able to see better the principles behind whipping. I'm just adding a little drop of vanilla right here in the beginning. Now,
For flavor?
For flavor. Now, if I took my whip and go like this, well, it looks like I'm really working hard and I'm really doing a lot, but I'm not doing anything. I'm just moving it around. When I whip, I want to bring air into that cream. And every time I do it, I'm lifting up, and it just almost instantly starts to become thick. In fact, right now we're about halfway there, and I can add some sugar to this now.
And that's the right time to do it, halfway
And that
there.
is about halfway is the right time, especially if you're doing it without a recipe and you want to just sweeten some whipped cream to taste. At least you've got the volume now, so you get a better idea how it should taste. See how I lift that up?
Doesn't take
and I'm
very long,
bringing
does
air
it?
in there. It doesn't take long at all. In fact, it's questionable when you're doing a small amount of cream whether you should bother even using a mixing bowl because it's so much easier just to clean this.
You're right.
That's it. It's done.
Look at the consistency.
Now let's whip it on a machine.
Doesn't fall off your finger.
Let's whip some
Right,
on a
excuse me,
machine.
taste it.
Okay, I'm going to give you a little
And the
vanilla.
reason we wanted to do this on the machine is to show you the dangers of over whipping, which you can do if you're using a mixer.
Okay, there's a little vanilla for that one too.
And the speed is very important too. You can actually have this at too high a speed.
No question about it. And I would say whip it halfway, add your sugar, and then slow it down at that point.
Okay, all right. And all mixers will say whipping cream on it, so just follow your manufacturer's directions there. You'll know what speed it is. I had to start all over one day. I whipped it. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it turns to butter.
It totally wrecked it. Oh, we're going to stop this at a couple of stages for you.
Okay, let's.
So that you could see different uses for cream.
Okay,
Well,
this is the point.
let's try this powdered sugar so you can tell us the difference.
Now, powdered sugar has cornstarch added into it. It's ground so finely that if it didn't have some starch added, it would just cake up. So I don't use powdered sugar for whipped cream. I don't particularly like it. I don't think there's any reason to add the extra starch.
All right, we're going to do it
But
just so to
I
see the
would
difference
use
in
it for
taste.
buttercreams and for decorating or for sprinkling on.
For other frostings.
Right.
Okay. Now, Jasper was telling me that he would stop this cream at different stages depending on what you're going to use it for.
Right. So, for example, if we want to have fresh berries, let's stop it right now.
All right.
We have some beautiful fresh raspberries we just picked up. I don't want big, thick, starchy whipped cream. I want something that's nice and smooth and creamy. So I would stop it right there while it's still a little bit runny.
Okay. Now, the next stage would be for what?
The next stage would be if you were using it for decorating a cake or for folding into a mousse like we did here.
And look how
okay,
fast.
stop.
Check how fast this
stop.
scared me. Well, I see it sticking to the beaters already. I almost overdid it.
It's almost over already,
Here,
but
take
it's just about right here, almost a little bit over. Let's, for the sake of experiment, let's take it just another stage further, which is where we don't want to take it.
Okay. I want you to know I am wrecking this on purpose.
And if you keep whipping this, you'll end up with butter.
So if you run out of butter, whip some cream, right?
You can do that, yeah. And remember, when you're whipping cream, the higher the fat content of the cream, the better the whipped cream is going to be. So in most cases,
Look at
see how that's completely curdled now? And it's very close to being butter. And too many people do that because they don't stay with it with the machine. And it really goes fast. Once it starts to thicken, it really goes fast.
See how curdled that is?
Right, and it's
taste
not
it.
very palatable. It'll taste greasy to you.
Oh, it's awful.
Yeah.
It's really awful. Now that we know the techniques of whipping cream to stay out of trouble, we thought it might be a good idea to take you through whipping egg whites. There are enough minefields you can run into here. We thought the techniques were important.
Right, so we're going to start by making lemon souffle.
I did chill that bowl for you.
Okay, well, the bowl does not necessarily need to be chilled for
good.
this, but what's really important is that the bowl is very clean, and also the utensils that you're whipping with, that they're very clean, because fat is the enemy of egg whites when you're trying to make a meringue. And the slightest bit of fat, a little butter stuck to the bowl, will ruin it. And
Really?
they won't
That
come
critical?
up and they won't stay up. And that's exactly the same reason why the yolk cannot be a part of the white.
So if you get a little bit of yolk in your egg, bag it. You got to start all over.
So we'll start by separating the eggs. I like to do it right through my fingers.
You're kidding. I've never seen that.
And for this recipe, I need 5.
Now, why? It's just safer that way, huh, than back and forth? Well,
It is a little safer, and it's a little more gentle on the egg.
well, one thing I've learned working with you here is you do a lot with your hands as opposed to with utensils.
I do, and I use, I think it's just part of loving food and being a cook. I like to touch the food. I like to feel what temperature it's at. I like to really be a part of it. And most cooks are like that.
How about trying it the old-fashioned way? Let's just
Sure.
do this. Okay, I give it a little tap, back and forth. See if I can do this without embarrassing myself.
That's a good way to do it, too.
And to put one egg at a time in a little bowl. That way, if you mess up, you haven't wrecked the whole thing.
That's a wise idea, because you really have an investment in time and eggs at any point. And like I said, one speck of yolk, throw it away and start over. The recipe will not work.
Okay. Let's say you got a little bit of shell in here.
Okay, you can
Got
use
some techniques for taking
you
that
can
out?
use an empty shell to take that out, like that.
Okay.
And that's a good way to do it.
All right, good. And talk to me about temperatures.
Okay, well, if a recipe calls for warm eggs, by all means, bring them up to room temperature, because that recipe is timed also to work with those kind of eggs.
Now, in the case of whipping egg whites where we've separated, does it matter? You said the bowl didn't have to be chilled. Does it matter if the egg whites are chilled or warm?
No, it does not.
No better?
No, in fact, some meringues, there's many types of meringues. Some meringues are done with really hot sugar. The Swiss and Italian
Okay,
meringues.
so temperature is not a factor.
Temperature is not a factor here.
Okay. And how about speed here? We said in whipping cream you shouldn't go too high, whereas in beating whole eggs we were able to go as high
as
speed as you
and
can.
the same thing with the egg whites. You can whip them
At a very high speed.
at a very high speed.
Can you over whip whites?
You can, if the recipe calls for soft peaks, and it depends, again, what the purpose of the meringue is. For instance, I make pancakes. I have a recipe for pancakes where I put whipped egg whites in, but I don't want real stiff ones. I want just the soft peaks. Okay. When we talk about peaks, you see where that folds there?
Yes.
That's a soft peak.
And if you want a stiff peak,
And when it's stiff, when I pull this up, it's just going to stand straight up.
now do you want soft or stiff here?
We want soft now. We're adding sugar at the point where we have a soft peak.
Okay.
And then we're going to take it to stiff. Okay, a lot of recipes stop right here for the soft peaks. It just depends on the recipe you're using it for.
All right, one more step.
Now we're going to bring it all the way. I think we have a pretty, yes, we do.
See, it's sticking to the bead, as you can tell.
Yeah. Okay, we talked about soft peaks. When I lifted them up, they were soft enough that they folded over. Now with this, it's so solid, it just takes whatever shape you give it. And that's a firm, fully whipped meringue. So now we're going to fold it into our base and make a souffle. We normally start by just adding a little bit, and what we're doing is we're lightening the mixture that we're folding it into.
So you actually stirred that first part in, I know.
Yes, you do. It's almost like tempering, getting it ready to be folded into.
So even if the recipe doesn't tell you to do this, you should.
Just a little bit to get it started. It's
Okay.
a good idea. Now we're going to fold the remaining into this.
And again, folding is combining in the most gentle
In the
fashion.
the most gentle fashion, exactly. So we're really lifting and putting this through when we fold this. And try to cover the whole bowl so that each motion, you're mixing as much as you can with as little motion as possible.
You see what he's doing too? He's actually folding his spatula over, hence the term folding. I never thought about that.
Exactly. Yeah. Now for souffle, believe it or not, that's enough. You see a
Really?
little bit of streakiness.
You can still see the
You
white.
can stop there, okay? If you keep going, all you're going to do is start flattening out your meringue.
All right.
And ruin your chances. Now you take a mold that's already been greased with sweet butter, and then pour sugar in it,
All right.
and pour off the excess sugar,
All right.
and then put your souffle mixture right into that. And it should leave you at least 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches from the top of the bowl. And this looks just about perfect.
Because you need room to rise.
And when this souffle rises, it's going to come up to here.
Now, how many times have people made souffles when it didn't rise?
It happens now and then.
And what causes that?
Usually a bad oven temperature, too slow or too hot. So we're starting at 400 degrees, and as soon as we put this in the oven, we're turning it down to 375. And what happens is, as soon as you put something in an oven, your oven temperature drops anyway.
Because you open the door.
Because you open the door. So we were looking at cooking this at 375, so we started at 400 for that nice even temperature. Now, when the souffle is finished, which will be about a half hour from now, let's say you're 5 minutes away from serving it, but the souffle is up, you can turn that oven down to about 250 and keep it at a hold, like kind of on a holding pattern.
Oh, good, in case you're not finished with dinner
But
yet.
at this point, you're at risk.
Couple more blending techniques, and to juxtapose them, we're going to make muffins and bread, and you'll see a big difference and reasons for it.
Right, there's many differences, but let's get the bread started first by
Alrighty.
mixing yeast and sugar. We have some yeast in this bowl and some sugar here, and I'm adding just a little bit of warm water. And
Warm
I'm
being
gonna-
like lukewarm?
lukewarm, up to 100 degrees or more. And just mix that and let that sit. And what happens is the yeast starts eating the sugar. Remember, yeast is a living creature. It's tiny, but still living. And in 10 minutes, that's what yeast looks like. And that's called blooming yeast. And that's what this will look like in 10 minutes. So we start the bread with this. And what I'm making today is the most bare bones, leanest type of bread you could make. There's no eggs, there's no fat, there's no extra ingredients, just the yeast, the sugar, a little bit of vegetable oil, some salt, and then some white high-gluten bread flour. And in muffins and cakes we use pastry flour, which is low in protein, and in breads we use high-glutinous flour. And the more protein, the more gluten, the stronger, the chewier the bread will be. But this is it. This is the basic flour and water bread.
What's happening with the yeast, the sugar, and the salt?
Okay, the yeast is eating the sugar, okay? And that is making the yeast happy and making it come to life and making it very active. The salt is actually retarding the growth of the yeast, so we keep a balance in the bread so the bread just doesn't go wild.
So if you forgot the salt, what would happen?
If you forgot the salt, the bread would tend to be a lot more livelier, and it would not be as taste as good.
And if you forgot the sugar?
If you forgot the sugar, you might have a fairly dead batch of yeast. You could have a really heavy, dense bread. Okay, I've got this blended enough now that it's time for me to start kneading. And I'm going to just flour the surface lightly. And I'm going to dump this right out onto the surface.
This is the best part of bread making, kneading.
Yeah.
Take out all your aggressions on this dough.
Aggressions, and there's just something about bread that I just feel like making bread is such an important process for me as a professional cook. It just brings me back to what cooking is all about, and it's about nourishment. And bread, you know, fancy foods and the expensive vinegars come and go, but bread has sustained us all for centuries, and this is the food that keeps us alive.
I know what you're saying. I feel like a real cook when I make bread.
Yes, and a real mother and everything else.
That's it. I just keep naming it. I mean everything.
Okay, now I just want to show you this technique. If you can watch how I'm doing this. Every time I push, lean on the bread, I turn it around. And this is the same knead that a potter uses, making pottery. And that, in fact, that's where I learned it from. turn it. So it's basically a quarter turn every time I push.
When do you start pounding? You pound?
No, I don't pound. This is all I do. And this process takes about 8 to 10 minutes because I'm a fairly substantial person. I can exert a lot of force under this bread. It would take a machine about the same time, and it might take somebody who wasn't as large as I am a little longer.
Someone petite and diminutive like me.
Right. So, let me show one thing before I stop here. We talked about protein, and protein, as they're kneaded together, form strands, and they link together. You can't really see it, but you can when you tear this bread. You can see how short these strands are. Now, I'm going to keep, it just breaks really easy. It pulls apart. I'm going to keep kneading this bread, and as the proteins get stronger and link together more, when I pull this bread apart after I'm finished kneading it, it's going to be very hard, and you're going to be able to see the strands are much longer in it.
Okay. Another way to accomplish what Jasper has just done is with a machine. I'd use a half a cup of sugar, a stick of butter, a quarter pound, a heaping tablespoon of salt, like that much, and boiling milk, a cup and a half. And the boiling milk will melt my butter. Mix the salt and the sugar. And while that's doing that, I take 1.5 cups of ice cold water. And the combination of the boiling milk and the cold water gives me the exact right temperature to ferment the yeast. Is that the right word, ferment? Does
Yes.
yeast ferment?
Or to activate, let's say.
Activate the yeast. I knew there was another
And that
word.
temperature would be just about the same lukewarm temperature that I used to start my bread.
Exactly.
But you just remember with yeast, if it's hotter than 130 degrees, it'll kill the yeast.
Right.
And if it's too cold, it'll kill the yeast also.
Okay. Okay, my butter's melted. I throw in 1.5 cups of cold water. Give it a stir. I use 2 packages of yeast. If you use that quickie yeast, it goes faster, but active dry is pretty good too. Who's not in a hurry though? I give it a stir. You can see what that looks like. Actually, I rushed things. My butter wasn't quite melted, but it'll go. Not a big deal. And I cover it and let it sit for about 5 minutes.
Okay, now while you're doing that, I just want to show you, I've been working a little bit harder on this. I don't know if you can pick it up, but I know you can see it now. Just the way the bread tears, how the strands have
You
been
can
getting
definitely see it. I
stronger.
hope you can on camera.
And it's a lot harder to tear, and the strands are getting longer. Okay, so I'm just going to knead a little bit more, and I'll be finished with this.
Okay, I put it into my mixer here. I'm going to turn this on. It's going to be rather noisy. I'm going to add an egg. And while that's beating, I'm going to add 4 cups of flour. Okay, I've now added a total, actually, of 6 cups of flour. What is it? Nothing works right, when you really want it to. All right. Put in my bread hook, and I'm going to add more flour until the dough has moved away from the sides of the bowl, and that's how I know when I've used enough flour.
Yeah.
Almost. Okay, it's beginning to pull away from the sides, and that tells me there's enough flour in there. I'll tell you, I've made this with as little as 9 cups of flour and as many as 12 and gotten the same results. Okay, and then we do with this exactly what you do.
Okay, and what I did is when I finished kneading it, I formed it neatly into a ball and lightly oiled it in a bowl, lightly oil the bowl and the top of the bread.
Why do you do that, by the way?
So it doesn't stick and make a big mess to the bowl, and so it doesn't get a heavy skin on it, which bread will tend to do. And then I covered it with a little plastic wrap. You could also use a damp cloth and just lay a damp cloth over there. Keep it in a warm spot, not hot, not cold, but a warm place in your kitchen, and wait until the bread is more than double.
Okay, here comes the fun part of bread making. We get to punch it down, but first we need to grease and flour a couple of pans. I use this spray just because it's easy and low cal, but you could use margarine or butter. Tap around the flour, which sticks to the grease. Get rid of the excess.
Now, this is the easy part. Punching the dough. Why do we call it punching? That's why. Because we punch it.
Look at that smile on his face, huh? Is that his favorite part or what?
Okay. I'll pull it out. I'm going to make 2 loaves of bread with this. So I'm going to eyeball it, cut it in half. And I'm going to reshape these.
Now, you're not going to knead it again.
I'm not really
just
kneading, but I'm
it.
reshaping them. And basically what I want to do is end up with a smooth top, smooth part for the top and a crease on the bottom where it's not going to be seen. So I'm going to just work this just a little more. Now I'm pretty happy with the shape I've got. I'm going to just pinch it along the bottom. Okay, see what I mean? Smooth on top, the crease on the bottom.
Good job. Have you done this before?
Once or twice. Now we're going to let these rise again inside the pan till they're almost doubled, and then they're going to go into the oven and bake.
You must let it rise 2
Right.
times. If you don't, you're just what? Not going to get a
So you're not going to develop that full, beautiful, rich bread flavor. Well, aren't you going to punch yours?
Yeah. Yes. Ready?
Yeah? Ready?
One time! All the people that you want to do that to, you see, you name all these people as you punch this bread.
It's like a voodoo doll.
Yeah. This actually makes 3 loaves of bread, which is why it was a little higher. You're welcome. Ooh, that looks great.
Nothing like hot bread, right out of the oven.
All right, we'll give it a little check for doneness here. Give it a little tap. Hear that?
That's right. Listen for the hollow sound. You know it's done, and then put it on a rack to cool.
And again, a little cloth under it to absorb the moisture. Sounds good to me. Whose is this which? I want you to take note, this one's mine and this one's Jasper's.
Yes, that's right.
Now, when we were kneading bread, we kept kneading until the arms fell off or the mixer stopped. In the case of muffins, you'll find the recipe will always say mix just or blend just until the ingredients are combined. Very different process.
Very different, and very different types of food. The muffin is something we want to be tender, and the bread is something we want to be chewy and tough. So we handle them differently, and the bread we work very hard and really pound on it, and the muffins we're very gentle with. With the muffins we're going to use pastry flour, which is just the opposite of bread flour. It's very low in protein, whereas the bread flour is very high in protein.
The same as gluten?
Gluten,
That's the same
protein.
thing.
Gluten is the name of the protein.
Okay.
in
And on the
in
box it would
flours.
say pastry flour or cake flour.
It
more
should,
likely.
and then you have just to throw a cog in the wheel, you have all-purpose flour, which is more like bread flour than pastry flour. Okay, so you really do want to get pastry flour for baking muffins and cookies and pie doughs and that kind of thing. Also, we're going to leaven it with the baking powder instead of yeast. And what baking powder is a combination of baking soda and cream of tartar.
Ah, I didn't know that.
And the tartar being an acid and the soda being an alkaline. And when they mix dry, there's no effect. But as soon as liquid's added, there's an effect that releases gases and helps leaven the product.
And leaven meaning rise.
Rise.
Okay.
Okay. So let's start this. We're going to start by taking some butter and sugar and putting it into the mixing bowl. Granulated sugar.
And you can certainly find the recipe that you like in any recipe book. But
Oh,
the
yeah.
purpose of this is to show you the technique.
Right, and you'll see this. Many recipes start off with the words cream the butter and sugar.
Right.
So let's show you exactly what happens when you cream butter and sugar.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Look how white this is. Excuse me, Jasper. I just got to
sure.
show everybody.
That's what-
My butter and sugar has never looked this white.
And that's what creaming is. And so every recipe, when you see cream the butter and sugar, I want you to whip it till it turns, till that butter is white as that bowl. Okay?
I obviously have never done it long enough.
All right, so now we're going to continue making this muffins, and we're going to work at a little lower speed. I'm going to add a whole egg that was lightly beaten. And this is a little secret. This is my wife's recipe for blueberry muffins, by the way. a little bit of grated orange rind, which really gives it a nice flavor.
Like the rind of one orange?
And we're going to mix this until this comes together.
Okay.
Okay, now our egg and orange rind is mixed well into that, so now it's time to start adding flour and milk to this recipe. But before we do that, we're going to sift the flour. So first I'm going to combine the baking soda, salt, into the dry flour mix, and then you can help me sift this. I'll just put it in here.
Now, can you skip the salt on this one?
The salt will affect the flavor, and anytime you're dealing with flour and you don't have salt, you're going to have a lot of blandness.
Okay, and you certainly couldn't skip the baking. What was it you put in, baking powder?
Baking powder.
And what does baking powder do again?
If you skip the baking powder, you're going to have really small muffins because they're not going to rise up at all. They're just going to sit in the pan.
So the baking,
like hockey pucks.
The baking powder is the leavening agent.
Right.
Okay.
So we want to blend this as little as possible. So instead of dumping it all together and trying to mix it together, we're going to alternate the dry and the wet. So we'll start with a little bit of the dry. We'll add about a fourth of this to here.
And the purpose of this is to try and keep the muffin light.
To keep it light.
Okay.
And to keep it to keep from over-mixing the flour. So I'm going to mix the flour a little bit with a little bit of liquid.
You know, I could get a spoon and spoon this in for you if that would help.
Sure. Well, I can do it like this too.
Okay.
And then about another quarter of this mix and a little more liquid. And I'm not going to stop until but I'm just adding a little time. A little more liquid, a little more liquid. And that's all the liquid. Now I'm going to stop one time, quickly. Just scrape down the sides and the bottom. And you always should have a rubber spatula, and you always want to scrape down whatever you're mixing. And this is a good time to do it before it's all the way mixed.
Medium speed?
Medium speed. And I'm going to stop right here. That's mixed enough.
That's it. That was about
That's it.
10,
now,
15 seconds.
Right. So I know we're going to have nice tender muffins here.
Excellent.
You only want to fill them about halfway. We have the oven preheated, 375, and we'll pop these right into the oven, and we'll have some great blueberry muffins.
30 minutes?
30 minutes, be great. Okay, these smell great. They must be close to done, if not done.
Should I give them the toothpick test?
Sure, go right ahead.
Clean.
Okay.
I know you like to use a
Now,
skewer.
what is the test? The test is we stick a skewer or a toothpick into the center of what's baking. You pull it out. If it was not cooked, you would see the batter stuck on there. It's clean, it's done.
Let's eat. Aside from cooking techniques, understanding combining flavors is an important part of cooking, as in broths or stocks that we keep talking about.
And stocks and broths are the foundations of Western cooking. Stock is made from bones.
So save your scraps.
And broth is made from meat, in this case an old fowl.
And what's a fowl?
A fowl is an old egg-producing chicken that has slowed down and has been put to rest.
Soup chicken.
Soup chicken.
You've heard the expression that chicken's walked uphill all its life. That's the one we want to use for it. Because it gives off more fat and more flavor. It's better than a spring chicken.
That's right. It has a lot of flavor, but it's not a very tender bird.
Okay. And what do we put with it?
So the way we start stocks, and all stocks are basically the same process. They have different cooking times, and some for darker stocks, sometimes the bones are roasted before they're put in, but basically the method is the same whether it's a fish stock, a chicken stock, or a veal or beef stock.
Okay.
So
we started with cold water. I saw you put in
First thing we did is wash the bones very well, and then cover them with cold water and bring them up to a boil. And that's the only thing that happens up to this point.
Why cold water? Does it matter?
It does matter because we want to start it from scratch. We want to take all the extract all the any kind of bacteria or any kind of bad things that are in that process. So we want to bring it up from scratch, from cold. And this white stuff we call scum on the stock.
Scum. Looks like
And we take
scum.
that right off the top as much as possible.
And what is the scum? Fat?
No, it's not fat. There's grease on there that we'll see about the fat, but it's just impurities in the meats and things that we don't want. If you don't take that off, what will happen is that'll cook back into the stock and make it cloudy. So So that's why we take that.
Will it
And
change
this
the
is something-
taste in addition to making it cloudy?
It will not help the taste.
Okay. Do you remove
Now
some of
the
this fat
second
too?
thing we do is degrease the stock.
Oh, you do?
Okay. And the way to do that is to take your ladle and push that grease towards the outside and use this motion. And then just dip it down. And I think you can see here that I'm just taking grease off and not liquid. But the most effective way is to push that to the outside. So when you degrease, and this is true of a sauce or gravy or anytime you want to take excess grease off of a liquid, just push it towards the outside and then lean your ladle in, and you hopefully will get pure grease and not take off too much liquid.
You make that look easy.
It is easy. Okay, so we have it pretty well
De-scummed and degreased.
degreased. And okay, so now that that's done, we're going to add our vegetables and our herbs to it. So first we'll start with the basic vegetables for stock, which we call mirepoix. Is carrots, celery, and onions. And there are no specific proportions. The more bones, the more vegetables you add to the stock, the richer it's going to taste.
Okay to stir?
Go ahead, just stir that right in.
And also, didn't you tell me that you might have saved your scraps? Weren't you talking
Right.
about scraps earlier?
Definitely.
Instead of using fresh onions, use the scraps of onions?
No question about it. If you save all the vegetable scraps while you're cooking, when it comes time to make a stock, by all means, that's what you should use.
All right, now how about bouquet garni?
Okay.
What is that?
Bouquet garni
A lot of recipes call for that.
is a little cheesecloth that has herbs inside it that are put into the stock while it's cooking. Now, I don't feel that's necessary
To put it in the cheesecloth?
to put it in the cheesecloth. For a simple stock that you're going to use at home, I really don't see the point in that. So I put my herbs directly into the stock.
I like that.
Okay.
One step eliminated.
So we're going to put a few bay leaves, and these are all the ingredients in a bouquet garni.
You put in 3, does it?
Okay. No more than that, because bay leaf is a strong flavor. Some fresh thyme, and here's an example where we were using fresh thyme earlier, and we picked the leaves off, and we just used the stem for the stock.
Much less work.
Okay, parsley stems that were left over from picking parsley.
No leaves, just the stems?
Just the stems. They have as much flavor. Whole black peppercorns, about a teaspoonful. 1 clove of garlic, optional. I happen to like what the garlic
And you
does
don't cut
to
it
the
up?
stock. I don't. Just put the whole clove in.
Would it make it
And
too
then-
strong if you did that? Cut it up?
Yeah, we don't want it to be garlicky at all. Then stock is neutral and has to be used for many different purposes. So we don't want it to have too much of any one flavor.
Gotcha.
And these are whole cloves, and be very careful with these.
How many are you putting in, like 3 or
I'm
4?
going to put 2 in.
2?
That's
They're
it.
that strong, huh?
That's all it needs.
Do I stir again?
Now at this point you can just stir everything into there. We don't salt the stock because the stock has so many uses. It might be used in a reduction, and so we don't salt it. We only salt the finished product that the stock's used in.
All right.
Okay, and at this point we're going to look for this stock to just simmer very slowly. And one chef I used to work for used to call it the stock was smiling. And so it's just a little ripple on the surface of the stock. And for chicken stock, about 3 hours, just like that. You don't need to fuss with it. Just let it go real slowly. Skim it and once in a while, and that's a chicken stock. And
Do we
it could
cover
not
it?
be any easier. Not covered.
Not covered.
Not covered. And that's the whole process. Now, if we were doing a fish stock, this whole process would take a half hour.
Ah.
And if we were doing a beef stock, it would take 8 hours.
Whoa.
Okay, to make a beef stock. So the idea is if you think in terms of the size of the bones, the fish bones are very small. It only takes a half hour to extract all the flavor. The chicken bones are medium size. It only takes 3 hours to extract the maximum flavor. And the beef bones are very large. It takes a full 8 hours to extract the flavor. If you cook stocks too long, they're going to turn bitter on you.
After about 3 hours, we have stocked, all set to strain.
So we set up a pot with a strainer over the top. You could use a colander.
Smells so good. And this stock has so many uses. You know, after this broth cools, you can freeze it in little baggies and use it for cooking vegetables and gravies.
It's very handy to have stock on hand. Another idea along those lines is you can freeze it in ice cube trays, too.
Good idea.
Yeah.
You know those great cream soups you have in a restaurant? Turns out that they're nothing more than a vegetable mixed with certain flavorings in that broth we just made.
That's right. They're very simple to make. Most of the cream of vegetable soups start by simmering some onions, sometimes some celery. In this case, we're just using sweet onions and simmering them in a little butter until they're translucent or almost clear, like these are just about reaching that point.
About 10 minutes.
Yeah, it takes about 10 minutes. At that point, we add whatever vegetable we're going to use, and today we're making the soup with butternut squash.
You could use pumpkin, you could use broccoli,
pumpkin,
you could use any
you could
vegetable
use any
you like,
number
right?
of vegetables. Now, the only difference would be with this vegetable, the squash has a lot of starch in it, so we're not going to need to thicken this soup with any extra agents. But if we were making, for instance, a cream of broccoli soup, we would want to add a starch, which could be a roux, it could be rice, it could be potato,
And
but
roux-
something that will thicken it.
And roux is?
Roux is butter and flour that are cooked together.
Okay.
Okay, now if you could just pour that, and just pour enough over it just to cover that.
This is our
This is our chicken stock that
stock
we made.
that we just made. Just enough to cover the veggies?
Just enough to cover it. Remember, if the soup comes out too thick, you can always add a little more broth to thin it down. But if it comes out too thin, it's hard to thicken it up without giving it a lot of extra cooking.
Okay. Do we
So
cover
that's-
that while it cooks?
That's just perfect. No, you're just going to leave this simmer open without the cover. You can cover it partially if you don't want to reduce too far.
Okay.
But
So we'll
will
let that
just
cook.
for about 20 minutes till the vegetables are tender, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, this is cooked about a half hour now, and it's falling apart, so it's ready to be pureed. And today we're going to puree some of it in the food processor.
You could use a blender, right?
You can also use a blender.
And I know you're going to do it.
And I'm going to use the old-fashioned food mill, which for my personal taste, I like the food mill a lot because it has a little coarser texture, whereas that's going to puree it very fine. This is going to just leave a little texture to the food. And all you do is put it in there and push it through.
Alrighty, I'll give it a try with this.
Your turn.
Because I don't need that. Pour them both in?
Yep.
This is hot. I'm being a little careful here.
Okay, so we have about 2 quarts of soup here. We've got the flame on under it now.
When I
This
get
beautiful,
this out of your way.
beautiful pureed squash, onions, and chicken stock. And now we want to really turn it into a soup. So I can tell you, like I said earlier, make it thicker, not thinner. And this is going to need just a little thinning out. So I'm taking some chicken stock here that we had left over and just blending that into there.
It's a matter of taste how thick it is.
It
right?
is,
There's
and
no
it's
right
also,
and wrong.
There's no right and wrong, and there's also a matter of taste of how much cream you want to have. But as for a general rule, for people who aren't sure, I'd say for about every quart of soup you make, you want to put about 1 cup of cream in for a cream soup.
Heavy cream, light cream, doesn't matter?
Heavy cream, always.
Heavy cream.
When you make soups with light cream or half and half, you're really increasing your chances of having the soup break. And heavy cream is
What does that mean, break?
curdle.
Oh,
Okay, and heavy cream, because it's got so much fat in it, it almost never curdles under heat, okay?
I see.
Now, if you don't want all the fat, use less heavy cream,
okay. Don't use
But
something
don't
else.
use light cream,
Got it.
okay?
Use
So
less,
we'll
not
let
a
this-
substitute.
Right. And the color to me is beautiful, and I think now we need to season it up, so. It needs a lot of things.
Needs a lot?
Yeah, it needs salt, it needs pepper, and one spice I like to use on the squash soup is just a little bit of nutmeg, and this is a fresh nutmeg.
I love fresh
And-
nutmeg.
Nutmeg is a wonderful flavor, but remember, it's a very strong flavor, and you don't want to overdo it. But that's also a good reason to use it, because it is stronger, and you're going to get the true flavor. Okay. Needs some salt.
One thing Jasper's taught me is you keep tasting all the way through this so that you know how the flavors change as you go along. So the next time you make it, gee, I thought I remembered it being, saltier that, or more nutmeggy than that, or more tasting more like the vegetable.
Okay. I'm pretty happy with that
Are
right
you?
now. I think it tastes delicious.
I think it's great.
Okay.
Don't you just love it when you taste something and you love it and you say, how did you make this? And the person says, oh, a little of this, a little of that. Right.
Right.
Well, Jasper's concocted something for us to show us what a little of this, a little of that means.
Right, and we're going to make a quick soup, and the premise to this soup is that if you have a good broth, or a good stock, it's very easy to make a good soup.
Show us. Come on.
And so we're going to take a few favorite ingredients, and we're going to start by taking some olive oil and putting it into the soup pot and adding a little bit of garlic. Nah, we'll add a lot of garlic.
Well, I can tell you that's about 4 tablespoons of crushed garlic there, or chopped garlic.
About 2, yeah.
2.
And some onions, and we're just going to stir these for a minute and let them simmer. Now, this soup I'm going to add sun-dried tomatoes and cannellini beans. So let's talk about some of these dried products for a minute while this is simmering.
Garlic and onions, first step in a million dishes.
A million, and not often, not many soups, but for this, it's kind of an Italian-style soup. Okay, sun-dried tomatoes are tomatoes that are what we just said, dried in the sun. And they're very pungent. They're much stronger than a fresh tomato. And they're almost reminiscent of olives to an extent.
Yeah.
And the way that you reconstitute them is to steep them like you would tea in some hot water and just let them soak. And they take about 20 minutes to soak.
Well, they get very soft.
Right. The juice on some tomatoes is better than others. This happens to be pretty delicious, the juice from this. So we can use a little bit of that in our soup, too.
Good. It's delicious.
To flavor the soup. Beans are not soaked like that. For beans, what you do is you soak beans overnight. These are some dried beans soaking in water. Always remember that the beans are going to double in size as they're soaking. So when you do soak them, put twice as much water in as you think you're going to need.
Why do you soak them?
You soak them so that they absorb a lot of the liquid they're going to need before you cook them, because if you cook them from the dry point, they're going to break apart before they ever get cooked through. The outsides are going to break apart.
And eat up all your broth, right?
Soaked, and they're going to eat up all your broth. And the beans don't need to be cooked in broth. They can just be cooked in water for soup. And these are them finished now.
And then you would add it to the broth later?
Yes, and there's some little trick you need to know. If you need dry beans and you haven't had a chance to soak them, put them in a pot of water, bring it to a boil, turn it off, and let them steep in that boiling hot water for about an hour. You'll get similar results. Not perfect, not as good as soaking them overnight, but you will get similar results.
And you would do this with all such beans?
With any kind of beans, and there are hundreds of types of dried beans.
Okay, it's getting soft.
Yep, they're getting ready. So now we're going to add some sun-dried tomatoes, like we talked about.
And this would be good when tomatoes aren't in season, right?
When tomatoes aren't in season. When tomatoes are in season, I would use fresh tomatoes for this.
And since the broth tasted good,
just a
you're
little
throwing
bit of
in
broth.
maybe a half a cup or so?
Right. And our beans that we had already cooked in water.
And the proportions, again, are...
Well, it depends. How much beans do you want to eat? How much tomatoes do you want to eat? Okay, and then some chicken broth to cover that.
Yeah. Okay, just enough to cover like we did before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. Then we're going to just stir that up.
Oh, you know, I wanted to ask you about these mushrooms, too, while we're talking about reconstituting. You know, sometimes, remember when we were in the grocery store and we can't always find good mushrooms?
Right.
You suggested to me earlier we should
Dry
use dried
mushrooms.
ones.
And I'll tell you, whenever I make a cream of mushroom soup, for instance, I love to put dry mushrooms in because...
Right along with your fresh ones?
Yes, because dry mushrooms have a lot more pungent flavor than fresh mushrooms.
Ooh, that you can smell it.
And the mushrooms you just steep in, again, like you would tea, hot water, and let them soak for a while. And save this liquid. This mushroom liquid is delicious, and it can be used for stocks. It could be used whatever dish you're making, you're using those mushrooms in. So they're a great thing to have.
All right.
Now let's just season this soup up a little bit.
Salt and pepper.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if you're not sure of yourself in this, I don't know, I would say just go light. You can always add more salt and pepper.
Absolutely.
You can't take
always
the salt away.
Under seasoned. You cannot take the salt away. Anything you're cooking is always taste, every process along the way. And if you like a dish and you want to recreate it, it's good to have memories of what it tasted like before it was finished, as well as the finished dish, so that as you're making it, you can remember all those flavors and you can duplicate dishes that you like a lot.
And one more tip, mark up your cookbook, you know, or write it down. If you created a little of this and a little of that, you got to write it down because the next 2 weeks later you might not remember what you did.
I'm always reading out of my own cookbook when I'm at work, and people look at me and I said, "Do you think I can remember all this?" I wrote some of these things 5 years ago.
That makes me feel better if you have to do it. All right.
Okay, would you pass me the spinach, please?
Now, how do you know spinach, beans, tomatoes, onions, garlic goes together?
Well, those are flavors that are classically put together in the region of the Mediterranean. So whenever you're cooking, try to stick within to one theme, try to stick within one region.
And I suppose maybe another good piece of advice would be, if you're nervous about that, follow a recipe, taste it, and adjust it.
Right, adjust it after you've made it.
All right, I've got a bowl
twice.
here for you.
Now that spinach just wilted right away, and this soup is ready, except we just want to taste for seasoning.
Ooh, may I do that? I don't burn my mouth like I did my fingers.
I liked it more peppery.
Definitely more pepper. That's what I would have said, for sure.
Nice
Spoon some into here.
And this is a nice,
Man, this is lovely.
hearty peasant-style soup. And there's one more thing that soup needs, and that's some freshly grated Romano cheese or Parmesan cheese on top. Okay.
Voila! As much as I love to experiment in cooking, I confess I've always been intimidated by sauces, primarily because I never learned the basics, especially when they have fancy names like roux and bechamel. Jasper's here to save the day and give us the basics.
Roux is the first step in a lot of sauces.
And roux means?
Roux is a combination of equal parts butter and flour.
All right.
And they're mixed together. And what you want to look for when you get them mixed is for something that has a consistency that's similar to, the best description I can think of is wet sand. So if you
Good
can
way to
see
describe
that
it, yep.
texture. Okay, now roux are used for different types of sauces. We're going to make a bechamel, also called balsamella in Italian, and in American it's what we call the white sauce, the same sauce you make for macaroni and cheese.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
All right, so that's the
And
roux.
for that sauce, for the white sauce, we make a white roux. Now, for other sauces, we have to make a darker roux. Now, if you can see it bubbling like this, and I have to stir this constantly, and we're just starting to see it just change a little bit. And the way I test for the white roux is I take a whiff. Let me bring it up to you a little bit.
It smells
It's starting to smell a little nutty flavor, almost like walnuts. Do you get that smell?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, that tells me it's cooked, and I don't want any color on this roux, so at this point we're going to add the milk very slowly, a few drops at a time. Okay, now another important principle, let that thicken up a little more. Okay, another important principle when you're dealing with a roux, with a hot roux, add a cold liquid. With a cold roux, add a hot liquid. Okay, and the reason is they don't combine well when they're at the same temperature.
I see.
And I can't explain the scientific reason for that, but I can tell you many times I've seen this sauce curdle, and it's
Now it's lumpy now, but I shouldn't worry about that, right?
No, because we're going to keep thinning it.
Now how much milk am I putting in here? Until what?
Until we hit the texture we like. So we let it, we add milk, we let it cook, thicken up, and then we look at the texture. And right now, and it's still lumpy. The lumps are going to cook out of it, and of course we're going to also strain this sauce at the very end too.
Would it help if you whisked it as you went along or not?
You can use a whisk. I just use the wooden spoon because eventually it'll all come out, and I don't want to scrape this too hard because it's a white sauce. I don't want to get lots of the metals or any kind of reaction going with the pot. We're pretty close. I think we're going to
Do you mind if I taste it?
Sure. Should be very bland at this point.
You're right. Tastes like farina.
Yeah. Okay.
Or what I remember.
It's never going to
tastes
be.
like.
It's never going to taste like that soup we just made. I mean, it's a cream sauce. So, but we're going to add a little nutmeg to it, a little fresh nutmeg, and again, be careful with it. Lots of Italians put a little Marsala wine in bechamel, which gives it kind of a sweet flavor, a little sweet wine.
So again, think about what you're making.
What you're determining for, but this is more of a sauce that you use to make something else with than a sauce that you would make and pour over food.
So at least if you see this in a recipe book, you can follow the recipe.
Right.
But this is the technique that the recipe won't show you.
And it's also the technique for making roux. Okay, the sauce is ready now, and we're just going to strain it like we do all sauces.
Just to catch all the extra flour or whatever?
To catch any of the lumps or anything that...
See, so if it's not perfect, it doesn't matter. We strain it out.
That's right. And that's it. And it's ready for many uses.
Remember those poached eggs? Do you love Eggs Benedict, but wish you could send out for the hollandaise?
Okay,
Hollandaise, Maestro.
We're going to make hollandaise. And we start hollandaise with some egg yolks. We're going to use 6 egg yolks. This is a large batch, but for purposes of demonstration, it's easier for you to see what's going on. And for that, I'm going to use a little more than a tablespoon of water to get it started.
Now, you could do this in a basic double boiler. No.
No, you couldn't, because you need to have the wide bowl, the angle to work with.
So just get a pot of water and a wide bowl.
So, but this is a double boiler by definition. You have 2 pots with some steam heat underneath. So we put the egg yolks in the water on this, and the thing about this is to whip it and to constantly keep it moving and stirring it. And be careful, check your heat once in a while. If it's boiling too rapidly and your heat is too high, you're going to make scrambled eggs. Now, the idea of
So just a gentle bubble on the water.
Right. Now, the idea to really make a good, strong hollandaise so you don't have to go through the heartbreak of making it 5 times before it comes out right, is to cook the eggs right to the brink, right to the edge, where they're just about to become curdled. And I'll show you something. If you can notice now the color of this, how that deep yellow color of the egg yolks. And you watch, as they start to cook, the color's going to lighten up, and you'll see the final color of the final dish. Now, once in a while, take that off. If you see that your mixture is starting to get ahead of you a little bit, it's starting to stick in certain spots, get it off of that heat. Keep it mixing, and then put it back on the heat when you feel like you've got it back under control. And remember, when you look at this water off of the heat, it doesn't look, it's just bubbling a little. When you put that bowl back on there, all of a sudden you've got a big buildup of steam.
Because you put a top on it.
Right, because you put the top on it.
Wow, it's getting velvety looking.
So it's starting to look pretty creamy. I want you to cook these eggs right to the brink, right till they're almost ready to turn into scrambled eggs.
You're going to need lemon, so why don't I squeeze some for you?
I am going to need lemon juice down the road.
While you're doing that.
And by cooking these eggs to the most amount of heat that they can take, you're going to find that your hollandaise will rarely break. Okay. Now
and break means curdle?
Curdle.
Okay.
Now the next ingredient we're going to add is the butter. And another thing that might cause hollandaise to break is to have that butter at the wrong temperature. Either it's too cold or it's too hot. So when you melt the butter, we melted this in a microwave, but we did it a few minutes ago so that it's cooled down again.
Let me get this out of the way.
Again, I don't want it too hot. I don't want it too cold. I want it to be somewhere in between, somewhere close to a body temperature, a little warmer. So when you put your finger in, it should feel warm.
Okay, lukewarm.
Okay. Now you can see the difference in the color that we started with, which was a deep orange yellow, to this much whiter, creamier color that we have now. Okay, now we're going to add butter slowly into this mixture.
One little ladle at a
time?
time?
Yeah, but I want you to add it like this. Just in dribs.
Oh, sorry. And that's to keep it again from curdling.
Right. And I put a damp towel underneath. If you're doing this alone, you'll want it because you'll have to whip with one hand and pour butter with the other. Use a damp towel to keep the bowl from spinning around.
Say when.
Okay, more butter.
You need a partner, I think, on this.
It's nice to have a partner, but you don't have to. Make sure that each time that you add this butter, that you catch up. In other words, get it all incorporated, and then add more butter again.
And how do you know how much butter to add?
This is a pound of butter for 6 egg yolks. Okay. So this is, like I said, this is a large batch. Okay.
So we're going to use this whole pound.
And yes, we're going to use all of it.
And you can also use this on top of vegetables.
You can use it on vegetables.
Can you let it cool down and reheat it? I mean, can you make this ahead or not?
Once it's cooled off, it's going to break because the butter is going to solidify.
Cannot reheat
So it's got to be kept at room temperature. And because you've got eggs that are right at the wrong temperature for bacteria and for salmonella, hollandaise is something, you make it, you use it, you can hold it for up to an hour if you have to, but more than that, throw it away and don't try to use it again. Okay, one last ladle of butter. Now we've got all the butter incorporated into this eggs, and we made this great emulsion. And now it's time to season this up.
Lemon?
Lemon. Now, any time that we're cooking with lots of fat, and you can't get any richer than hollandaise. We've got egg yolks and fat. You usually find that acid will naturally improve it, so it'll balance it out. So add about a tablespoon of Lemon juice, good. Also, watch what happens as far as the color. It'll lighten up even more.
You can always add more, but not less.
Right. Okay, now before we add,
Enough?
That's almost enough. Let's see. Let's put some salt in. Remember, when you're seasoning foods, if you add lemon first before you add salt, and this is not just true for hollandaise, but for a lot of things where lemon, like vegetables, the acidity in the lemon will bring up a lot of the flavor in the food, and then you'll tend to use less salt, which is a good idea for most people.
That's
and
great.
So I always season with lemon first and then salt.
I didn't know that. So lemon means less salt.
A little more salt and a little black pepper. And also for this, a little cayenne pepper or Tabasco or any other kind of hot sauce that you like. I like it spicy.
I noticed.
And that's the hollandaise, and that's ready to use for any number of dishes.
Let's take a taste here. Tastes like great hollandaise.
Good.
Bring on the Benedict. Another sauce you can find in a recipe that can give you pause is beurre blanc.
And beurre blanc is just a simple butter sauce. We started this one with 1 cup of white wine and some finely diced shallots, and I think you can see that we've reduced it down to just about a tablespoon of liquid.
Wow, I'll say.
Now, a lot of cookbooks won't tell you this, but if you put a little drop of cream after you've reduced the wine and shallots down, a little bit of drop of cream in there, and then let that reduce again, just for a second.
No?
We'll just let that wait for a second. And when that reduces again, then we're going to stir in butter
What's that cream do?
over the heat. And this cream is going to stabilize the sauce. And again, this,
That's the secret.
in
No one tells
restaurant
you, right?
cooking, we might hold this sauce for an hour or more. All right, when we're making it to order, we probably wouldn't add the cream. But if you have to hold it, a little bit of cream really stabilizes it, and it will not separate or break, as we call it. It's a basic sauce. There's some variations on this sauce. Can be to start it with red wine, and you have a Beurre Rouge, or a red wine butter sauce.
Okay.
You can add herbs. You could add finely diced fresh tomatoes. You could add a little mustard to it. So there's a lot
Lemon
of
and lime.
variations.
Can you add lemon and lime to this?
Lemon and lime is, in fact, we
fish?
will season this with a little lemon,
Okay.
and lime is especially wonderful, and this sauce is especially great with fish. Okay, so now I've reached the point where I wanted to. I've reduced it a little more again, and now we're going to stir in the butter, and this is the tricky part, and this is where most people go wrong. Put that heat on the lowest possible flame, and then add your butter, and the butter should be very cold. Start with just a few pieces.
That looks like about 4 or 5 tablespoons
Right.
here. And why does
And
it need
just
to
stir
be
that
cold?
butter in.
Because once again, as you said before, you have to combine hot and cold.
Well, the hot and cold, yeah. If it's too warm, it might just melt right away. Instead of emulsifying into a sauce, it will just separate, and it'll just look like greasy butter.
So everything you do
You
when
want
you're
to start
trying to...
adding a little bit of...
Sure, everything you do when
few
you're
at a
trying to
time.
keep things from
We're trying
breaking,
right. We're trying to hold an emulsification.
you always do it then adding cold to hot, hot to cold, as you said before.
That helps
and
a lot.
This applies again here.
It does apply
Do I
here.
keep going?
Yes, please.
And this is a half a pound of butter altogether.
And this makes enough sauce for, six entrees, I would say, at least.
Oh, okay.
So the amount you use, of course, it's all butter, basically. It doesn't have to be rich if you only use a tablespoon on each piece of fish. It's not going to kill
I
anybody.
knew you'd make me feel good.
You can put all the rest in there now, and you can see we're getting a nice creamy emulsion here. And that's a classic beurre blanc. And all we do now is season it. And that could use maybe a little squeeze of lemon.
I'd say so.
Just a drop.
Because it tastes a little buttery.
Just a drop. Good.
That much?
Little salt, because we use sweet butter, not salted butter. And I always use sweet butter in cooking
Why is that?
because that gives me the option to add salt to my taste, not to the taste of the guy who made the butter. When I'm done stirring this, it's finished, and it can be served right away. It can be poured. Many times we put the sauce under and put the fish on top.
Oh, that's what looks so pretty on those restaurant
Right.
plates. And how, can I keep this and reheat it?
You can't really bring this
Not
one
really.
back, so you just want to make a small quantity, enough for that night. But you can hold it in a warm spot for an hour.
Okay.
Okay, and that's finished.
Beurre blanc. I had an opportunity to go to Italy not too long ago and was stunned to find out how different their basic marinara sauces are compared with ours. Theirs involve fresh herbs, fresh tomatoes.
Well, that's right. There's hundreds of versions, and even in Italy, there's many different versions of this
Right.
sauce. And some are quick, they're with fresh tomatoes. Some are long, they're with canned tomatoes. The main point of this little cooking lesson now is to learn about how you put these sauce together and not the specific recipe. So we're going to start with some olive oil and a few bay leaves.
Bay leaves go in
And
first.
The bay leaves go in first. And in both Italian and Portuguese cooking also, there's a special flavor that comes from lightly browning a bay leaf. And so it's good to let that bay leaf alone in the oil for just a minute. And let me just pick up, see the color of that bay leaf? That's the color I wanted, that brown color. Now we can start cooking. And we're going to add some onions and some carrots and some fresh garlic.
And you know, amounts throw people too. You know,
Amounts throw people way off.
Can you help on that? How much?
Okay.
How much garlic? How much onion? How much carrots?
The more vegetables
That much, I know.
No, the more vegetables you add to your sauce, the richer that sauce is going to taste, the sweeter your sauce is going to taste with the onions and the carrots especially. The garlic, not so much, because the garlic doesn't have a lot of natural sugar. But these vegetables have lots of sugar in them. And by cooking them on a high heat and letting them brown, not stirring them too often, we're going to caramelize those sugars in that. And then when we add our tomatoes, we're going to have that balance of sweetness and acidity.
And caramelize means?
Caramelize is to extract the sugars, to darken the sugars, just like making caramel.
Okay. Now what happens if you just do garlic and oil and fresh tomatoes and a little basil? Like
Right.
I do.
What happens?
Yeah.
Well, nothing happens. It probably comes out suitable or
That's very kind of you, Jeff.
however you want it. But what happens when you do this is it comes out great because you got that sweetness from the vegetables. You've also really melted these vegetables down so they don't have a real prominence. They just become part of one instead of little separate entities in the sauce. Now, as far as the type of tomatoes, there's only one time a year, which is now, when we can get nice tomatoes that are fresh that look like this. And
Now being the summertime.
I would use fresh tomatoes every time if I had good tomatoes around, but in December, it's pointless, so you're better to use canned tomatoes.
And some canned tomatoes are better than others. I found some are more acidy than others.
No question about it. There's a real
So
quality
you just have to-
difference, and you'll have to test around. I can't name names right now,
Well, there are too many anyway.
and there's so many of them, but there's other things you look for, and when you're talking about canned tomatoes, are how much water is in the can, okay? Because you're paying for it by weight, basically. The more water they can work into it.
Now, would you
So-
drain a canned tomato before you put it in here?
No, I would not
You would
drain
not.
it. I would have to cook it longer, though. So it tends when you're using canned tomatoes, you have to cook that sauce a long time.
To evaporate the
In
water.
this case, by the time we add the tomatoes, we're only going to have to cook it for a few more minutes, and the sauce will be ready.
So how long are we doing this?
Until they brown,
10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Definitely smells sweet.
It is starting to caramelize now. Now, we don't want to burn them. We
Right.
just want them to be sweet and brown. And this is right where I wanted to bring them, so it's time. And this is going to make a huge difference in the end result of the sauce.
I have never
Now we're
seen
taking these fresh tomatoes and just crushing them with our hands. Now, this is where we get back into the million variations in the recipe. And if you want, you could just put the whole tomatoes in and run this through a food mill,
Why are we crushing it with our hands?
because I want that coarse texture to it.
Because you said so, right?
Well, no.
You're the boss. By
If you
golly,
want
crush
it
those
different, I'll do
tomatoes.
it differently.
I want it however you say is right.
It's fun doing this, too.
I love this kind of cooking, right? Both hands, both feet. I'd have been great in the vineyard stomping the grapes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got all these tomatoes in here.
I
We're
might add that
starting-
these tomatoes have been peeled. How critical is that? I'm not sure I'd have the time for this.
How
gotta peel
critical
them?
is it? Yeah, they should
Critical.
be peeled. Yeah. They should, or else
Okay.
you're going to have
Do you want this liquid?
Yes, the juice for sure. Okay, now this sauce, because we're talking about fresh tomatoes, we're looking at 20 minutes, and we've got a nice sauce that's ready to use, not only for pasta but for vegetables. For instance, we could have eggplant or zucchini and put that in there. But before we do that, we just want to season it a little bit.
How
Okay.
come the seasoning goes last?
Okay.
These fresh herbs.
The fresh herbs, I definitely don't want them hitting that fat on a high heat. It's just going to burn them. It's going to bring out their bitterness. So I don't want them exposed to really super high heat. The fresh herbs, the dry herbs, I might have added dry herbs right,
the fat?
right before I added the tomatoes. I would have stirred in the dry herbs. Dried herbs their flavors tend to expand under heat, whereas the fresh herbs, the flavors tend to die under the heat.
So that's why you use more fresh than you
Right.
would. About twice as much, would you say, if the recipe says 1 teaspoon?
At least twice as much.
Okay.
At least.
Twice as much
And
fresh
if
versus
you love
dry.
basil, for instance, you might want to put lots of basil in the sauce.
I love basil.
If this was going to be a 3-hour sauce, I wouldn't add this fresh basil now. I would wait till about 20 minutes
Okay.
before the sauce was ready, and then I'd add my fresh herbs.
Because it just dies out too much.
Because it'll just die out in the sauce, okay? Main thing is caramelizing those vegetables and making sure the herbs are added at the right time,
Which is at the end, or near the end.
near the end.
Well, after about 20 minutes, these tomatoes get all mushy.
Yeah, they're all pretty well cooked now, and that's why we only
May I?
cook it for 20 minutes. Sure. You want to give that a little taste now.
Oh my goodness, you're right about the caramelized. I have never done that, never heard of it.
And it's so sweet.
The difference, I wish you could taste this. The difference is it is sweet. There is no acid taste to these tomatoes.
Okay.
Another lesson learned. While we're at the stove, I've asked Jasper to make an omelet. I know it seems like the simplest thing in the world, but
Well,
they're also puffy in a restaurant and not on my plate.
It is a simple thing, but egg cookery is can be very simple, but it can also show a lot of great technique. In fact, if I wanted to see if somebody was a great cook, I might ask them to make an omelet. And if they didn't do too well, or if they didn't know how to make an omelet, I would think they really didn't know a lot about basic cooking.
Well, I really knew. I just said that, of course, so that give you an excuse to do
You're
it.
testing me. You're testing me. I've seasoned these eggs just a little bit.
Not a
Now,
whole lot of whipping. did you?
I'm using a Teflon pan. If I didn't have the Teflon or Silverstone, I would have my own omelet pan, which I do, which is a stainless pan, but it's so well seasoned, and I can never use it for anything but cooking eggs. All right, a little butter. And I'm just going to brown that butter, just lightly. And the reason I'm doing that is not for any other reason but one. It really flavors it nicely. Now I'm going to pour my eggs right into that hot butter. And the flame is hot now. This is not a slow process. And I'm going to stir them. And shake the pan at the same time.
Why are we doing that?
This is I'm whipping air into it, and this is what makes them light. So at the same time, I'm making like scrambled eggs.
I thought you forgot what you were doing for a minute.
No, this is the true French omelet, and the best way to make an omelet. And the trick is to know when to stop, and now it's time to stop
How do you know?
because it's almost completely set.
Okay.
All right, now, if I was going to make a cheese omelet, this is where I would add the cheese, or a stuffed omelet, any kind of filling, this is where I would put it in. For a plain rolled omelet, I would start rolling it now.
It's
Just
still
watch.
pretty gooey, though, inside.
Yes, but that's the way you want the omelet to be soft in the center. And just dump it right out on the plate.
Oh, it is smooth on
that's
the
a-
outside.
Beautiful, fluffy, light French omelet. Now let me show you a way to take a plain egg omelet and make it into something really special. Open that up. Put a little dollop of sour cream. And some beautiful caviar.
Oh, look at this.
Now
Have a little caviar.
there's an omelet.
A la Jasper. There are great recipes in cookbooks that you can find for crepes. Fill them with your favorite fillings, Newburgh, chicken dishes. But the trick is, how do you make the crepe?
Okay, the crepe is simple. It's a simple batter with milk and flour and eggs and sometimes sugar, sometimes not. And today we're using a non-stick pan, which is going to make it really easy. The important thing is to make sure that the pan is the right temperature
Meaning really
and
hot.
to make sure you know how much batter it takes to make the crepe. So you're going to experiment at least once before you make a good crepe. And this ladle is perfect for this pan. So I'm just going to dump it in and then
Swirl it.
swirl it. Tilt that pan so that you cover the whole thing. Okay. And just keep going around. See, I've covered the entire pan and get it back down.
You made it look so easy. Is that it?
That's it. Now we just wait for it to brown. And what you're going to look for is the edges. And when the edges of that pan turn brown, the edges of the crepe on the inside, you can see them turning.
You're talking under a minute here, right?
Less than a minute.
And using a rubber spatula may
The
be
rubber
better than
spatula
something
is
stiff.
nice. Yep, because I use it because I don't want to scratch. Now there's a few ways to do this.
Oh, look at this.
Okay?
See now, okay. Now that, all of that is in the technique of the way you spread it in the pan, right?
And there's one crepe, and that's all it takes on the second side. Okay, now, when the crepe comes out, you can stack crepes, but don't stack them hot. So if you're working on a surface like this, put out 4 or 5 crepes, and then when they cool down, then you can stack them together. Keep them wrapped in plastic until you're ready to use them.
Okay. Can I try one?
Sure.
Do I need to put any fat in here?
No. There's fat in the batter.
Oh, okay, and the recipe would have called
Put the
for
bowl
that.
down and get your hand right on that
Spill
pan.
all over it.
Drop it right in all at once and start swirling.
La 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 la. I missed.
That's good. That's okay.
Can we do this?
You can. You have to. You're going to have a lumpy little spot there, but that's okay.
Who's going to know?
Okay, put it down.
Okay. All right, the edges are starting to curl on me.
Yep. A little more. Wait for it to, so you can visibly see it turning brown a little.
Now, am I ready?
Yeah, you're ready. Loosen up the sides just a little.
All right.
Okay.
Flip it.
Flip
Right?
it. Flip it. There you go.
I did it.
You did it.
Look, Ma, I did it. Salad dressings. I love to make my own, but I confess every time I do it, I think, should I use the salad oil? Should I use the olive oil? Do I use the cider vinegar? How about the balsamic? Got some rules of thumb for me?
It's confusing. Well, I think you want to think in terms of what is that vinaigrette or salad dressing? What are you going to put that on? And in some situations nowadays, especially in modern cooking, it's not even going on salad. It's going on fish sometimes or on a grilled meat. This lighter, refined olive oil is generally used for cooking because it can withstand more heat, whereas this greener, fruitier, darker olive oil is just the opposite and is better to use for salads. So you want to think about what it is. Now, as far as salads go, when you're eating hearty greens like arugula, balsam endive, romaine, watercress, go for a richer oil, virgin olive oil or walnut oil or one of the heavier oils. Okay. And when you're making salads with some light, fresh butter lettuce out of your garden, don't use those heavy oils on them. Use lighter oils.
So like a vegetable oil.
Right. And all a salad dressing is oil and vinegar. And it doesn't even have to be vinegar. It could be fresh lemon. The basic vinaigrette is red wine vinegar,
half and half?
And salad oil. About 2/3 salad oil and 1/3 vinegar. And that would be what I would say the classic vinaigrette.
Salt and pepper?
Out of the textbook that was written 100 years ago. And it's whisked up
there,
very
right?
well. And that's your vinaigrette. However,
you notice this whisking part? I just learned this about a year ago.
now look at the difference between what the separated salad dressing and the emulsified. Not that that's truly emulsified, but you want to whisk it so that
they're blended.
At least for a few minutes, they're blended. Okay, when you start switching to different types of oils and different vinegars, the ratio can change with anywhere from half oil to 3/4 oil.
Okay.
No less than half, no more than 3/4. That would be my rule of thumb. So I'm going to show you a little more complex version of a vinaigrette. Not that it's complex at all, but it's just a tomato basil vinaigrette. And I'm going to start with a little Dijon mustard, which gives it a nice flavor. I'm going to use olive oil on this.
What else
You can help me because you can pour that in for me.
All right.
And I'm putting some shallots right in there, and I want you to
Tell
slowly.
me when. How do I know?
You can just keep it going at that pace. And I'm doing this slowly so I can make an emulsion and keep the emulsion.
What's an emulsion?
The emulsion is when two ingredients combined form one. Okay, just like when we made the hollandaise.
Yep.
We emulsified butter and the eggs. That's doing fine.
Any more?
Yeah, a little more, please. Quite a bit more, actually. You can keep coming with it. Okay, I'm going to start adding more ingredients now.
All right.
And that's okay if that...
So what do you think? We poured in about 1/3 of a cup?
Now I'm going to put in some fresh tomatoes. I already have shallots in there, a little pinch of basil.
And shallots, by the way, are not really onions, and they're not garlic,
no, they're
not.
Shallots. Shallots are shallots. They're unique. They're very special. They're not always great because some markets, they don't get bought a lot. And so I would rather see you, if a recipe calls for a shallot, I'd rather see you substitute a good onion than an old dried up shallot. But when shallots are tremendous, they're really, when they're great, especially in the spring when they're in season, there's really no substitute for them. Okay, and a little balsamic vinegar now.
Okay.
At this point.
Say when. Now, if someone were measuring
That's
this,
good.
okay, what do you think we're doing? 1/4 to 3/4 on vinegar to oil?
Yes, because we have extra acidity here in the tomatoes and in the mustard too, and so we've got quite a substantial amount of oil. Little pepper, and a little salt, and that's a vinaigrette that is
And taste it.
delicious on salad, delicious on vegetables, like if you had
Perfect.
some leftover grilled vegetables, some artichokes. It's delicious on seafood, on grilled fish, on soft shell crabs, whatever, you feel.
All-purpose vinaigrette.
It's not all-purpose, but it's great on a lot of things because it's a great vinaigrette.
I was thinking I really didn't need to learn how to make mayonnaise, but Jasper
you
convinced
do.
me otherwise.
Yeah, we're going to make a quick and simple mayonnaise, and you're not going to believe how fast and easy and how much better it is than some of the store-bought mayonnaise.
Okay, a couple egg yolks.
Okay, a few egg yolks and a little mustard. Start whipping this, and I'd like you to start pouring slowly the salad oil into this mixture. When we get to about half of that oil, I want you to stop. Now remember, mayonnaise, this is a basic mayonnaise, and remember that mayonnaise is also the base for tartar sauce, aioli, which is a garlic-flavored mayonnaise, remoulade sauce, tomato remoulade, and any number of variations that you could create with fresh herbs, sauce verte. So there's millions of variations.
But
so
the
this is
basic
just a
technique
start.
is this.
Yes, this is the basic technique and the basic base.
And that
Okay,
was
now we've got
you
about
can-
half of the oil in. Now we're going to alternate the acid and the oil. In this case, we're going to use a little lemon juice, just very little. And I think you'll see that as we go along, the color of the mayonnaise will start to change. Oops. Okay, now a little more oil.
Say when.
You can keep going.
And the
Okay,
key
stop.
is you've got to keep whisking that.
After you get about half in, then the key is to alternate back and forth. If you do this in a mixing bowl, it'll be the same thing. You just go from one to the other. And if you do this in a food processor, I think you'll find it's even easier because you don't have to alternate. You can pretty much almost throw everything in pretty quickly, and it usually works out.
Now, it doesn't look white like mayonnaise in a store.
No.
What makes it look white in it like
Well,
mayonnaise in a store?
it doesn't have chemical stabilizers in it, and all the other good things that you get with store-bought products.
Did you read between those lines? Good cooking starts with good food, so I persuaded my pal Jasper to take me shopping.
Right, and I can't emphasize enough that statement Natalie just made, that when it comes to cooking, you take good ingredients, simply prepared, and you're going to have good food. And we're in the season now that's beautiful for fruits. With a plum, you want to feel something that is not hard,
But not mushy.
not mushy either. Most fruits will not ripen off the tree. Only the sun can ripen fruit. So most of these fruits, the best they can do is soften up a little. With the strawberries, we're going to look. This is a very easy demonstration. All you have to do is look at the color of those berries, and you can see this berry has not fully ripened. This berry is fully ripened. Often they're mixed together. There's not a lot you can do unless you're picking individually. Moisture is the enemy of berries. So look for little spots of mildew. Sometimes you'll see them towards the bottom. Look at the whole container of berries and make sure that you have...
The same would be true for raspberries?
And very true for raspberries. And also never wash berries.
Until you want to eat
never
them?
wash raspberries at all.
At all?
No.
Oh, okay.
Blueberries
Rinse them
you
off?
can wash, and strawberries you can wash. But remember this, cold water, wash them at the last minute right before you're going to eat them. And with strawberries, wash them first and then take the hull off, okay? If you wash them after you've taken the hull off, you get liquid into them. Anytime you pick up a melon and give it a swiff, if you can smell the melon through the skin, then you know you've got a ripe melon.
Give it a little squeeze at the
Give
end?
it a little squeeze at the end where it broke off the
It's
vine.
definitely soft there.
And this is a nice soft melon. Melon's going to be
How about
ripe,
you shake it to hear
and
the
you're not going to be
seeds?
disappointed. It's not necessary. You got the good smell, but you can.
I kind of like that action as you stand.
Yeah.
It makes it look like you know
wanna
what
do
you're
that.
doing.
You can do that. Okay, so here's some cantaloupe. And when you're dealing with cantaloupe, you use the exact same methods of testing, smell and taste, but another giveaway is color. And you'll see this whiter cantaloupe versus this one that's very green. And right away that indicates a certain amount of ripeness. Now,
Now, wait a minute. The green one is less ripe, right?
The green one is less ripe
than the whiter one.
It's more mature.
Okay. Jasper, my technique for picking good pineapples is to pluck one of these little guys out. If it comes out easily, it's generally ripe. Good technique?
No, not really. It's really a matter.
Why did I know you were going to say that?
There's a certain amount of luck involved with pineapples. If there's any indicators, maybe this more orange color versus this greener one, you might do a little better here.
This one's riper?
Right, but you can have a pineapple that's totally green and it's very ripe.
Now, wait a minute. Look at this, Jasper. What if I squeeze this? This is a little squishy.
Right, and now if it's a little
ripe?
too squishy, you might have an overripe pineapple, and you don't want that because it'll be brown inside and you'll have to cut most of it away.
Notice most of your markets will distinguish between California and Florida fruits. And the big difference is a humid climate and a dry climate.
That's right, and it's easy to tell. The stuff that's grown in Florida in the humid climate definitely tends to have more blemishes. It's got more problems with funguses, but basically you've got the same quality, sometimes even better tasting fruit in this Florida fruit because of the hotter sun. There's nothing wrong with it, and when it comes to citrus fruit, looks is not everything. In fact, a lot of the most beautiful looking citrus, or what you think of as beautiful, is artificially dyed so that they look right in the market. And a good example of that are these lemons.
Oh, is that not ripe or?
No. See, what happens with citrus fruit, including oranges and lemons, is that they turn from green to the color they're supposed to be, either orange or yellow, and as they fully ripen, they turn back to green, and that's known as regreening.
I didn't know
and
that.
So when you see green on a mature lemon or orange, don't be afraid of it. It's fully ripened.
But how do you know whether it's the first stage of green or the second?
Because they would never pick it during the first stage. Now here's some native tomatoes, and you can tell just looking at these things. I mean, I just love them. They're all different sizes and shapes. They were obviously grown outdoors in the hot sun, and you're going to have a sweeter, better product no matter how you look at it. These hot-to-house tomatoes have never been outdoors. They've been grown totally from the start to finish indoors in greenhouses.
Does it affect their taste?
Yeah, well, they don't have the full sweetness and maturity that a sun-ripened tomato would have. Okay, it's more of a process, but they can be very good quality.
Now, one vegetable you can usually find in pretty good supply is a bean.
That's right, green bean.
I guess that's fresh.
Yeah, that is, and with green beans, well, the green beans are going to be good all summer long. But what you want to do is find ones that are small for the variety, and these are just kind of generic green beans here. But you don't want the big, overgrown ones. When they snap, that's a sign of freshness. The dark green, solid color is a sign of freshness. And also the thinness of the bean is going to produce a better bean.
So if it doesn't snap,
yeah, they might be getting a little old. Okay. These are Idaho potatoes, and you can tell by the shape, the oblong shape. These are very high in starch, and they're excellent for baking. You should scrub the skins really well before you do bake them.
By the way, do you cook these when you put them in the oven?
I do, yes, and that releases the steam from them when you're making baked potatoes. It keeps them from getting too soggy. And you should wash them very well, and remember that because they're such high starch, they're excellent for baking. They're also excellent for deep frying, and for making French fries, this is the best potato. Now, for just the opposite reason, these low-starch chef-style potatoes are not good for baking, and they're not good for frying, but they're excellent for boiling and excellent for making mashed potatoes.
So what happens if I use this for mashed potatoes?
You're going to have very gluey, starchy mashed potatoes. And if you use this, you're going to have a very light, fluffy mashed potato.
Never knew that.
And these red potatoes are delicious, and they have thin skins, so they're excellent boiling potatoes. You just boil them whole and put a little butter and fresh mint or parsley on them, and they're excellent.
Difference in starch. I didn't know that. Huh. Jasper, talk to me about shiny and dull skins. Does that tell me anything?
Well, I'll tell you, in general, I think eggplants certainly shiny is a good sign. Peppers, yes. In fact, in general, all vegetables, fresh vegetables, should have a little shine, and that's a sign of freshness.
But not necessarily a wax look, like here.
Okay,
maybe it's a good
like
example.
cucumbers, it's more of an affectation. See, here's some pickling cucumbers, and this is more the natural color. The shines is more of an affectation that's put on to make you buy it.
And when it's in your garden, too, you have that roughness. That's telling you it's really fresh.
Yes, it does, yeah. And then these are really polished. Here's the perfect size zucchini. You know, so if I'm buying zucchini, I'm going to pick out all these. They have less seeds. They're just the perfect size. They're about 6 inches long, and they're going to have more flavor than the bigger, overgrown ones.
And asparagus, again, we're looking for firmness, are we?
We are. A nice firm. The size is a matter of preference. You can peel the larger ones. But nice firm stalks, nice tight on the top here, not loose, and watch if you see the tips are starting to get a little soft or moldy, then you know to avoid those.
Corn.
Yeah.
These start to age the second you pull it off the
Yes,
stalk, right?
They do, and the real native local corn, as soon as you pick it, the sugars start converting to starch.
Now, how about freshness? Someone
okay.
once told me, this is gross, but you stick your nail in it, and if you get squirted, it's fresh.
What I look for in corn, one way to truly tell if the corn is sweet and if it's fresh, that's really sweet.
I'm not with him. I don't know this way. You know, Jasper, most markets have their mushrooms all wrapped in cellophane, which makes it pretty tough to tell if they're fresh.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate because one thing that you want out of mushrooms is to start with a dry mushroom. And so not only does the paper prevent you from getting at them, but it also makes them more moist. This mushroom is very wet and soggy. It's not going to have a good flavor.
It really is, look.
And this mushroom is drier, and it's going to be easier to work with. It's going to yield a better tasting mushroom.
So touch it. That's the point here.
Yeah, you have
look
to
at it,
get
touch it.
Peel it. These are Roman mushrooms. With the shiitakes, you just want to look, again, for a nice dry mushroom that's not wet. And you can sometimes tell at the bottoms of these if they're getting really dry at the bottoms.
Yep,
you know the mushrooms are getting old.
So they should be firm and dry.
Right. These are the classic Pennsylvania white mushrooms.
Does it matter if they're kind of brown?
It does matter. And you want, for this white mushroom, you want it to look fairly white. And these are not especially great looking mushrooms today, so you might move on to the shiitakes or pick something else to do that.
You know, you bring up a good point, too, when you're shopping for produce. You know, if things don't look that great that you had in mind, skip it and do something else.
Do something else, by all means.
Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
Mint, marjoram, cilantro, basil, dill, and flat leaf parsley.
It's all green to me. Now, look at this, for example. Flat leaf parsley, curly parsley. Is there a difference in taste?
Yeah, there is. The flat leaf parsley I think has a nicer flavor, not quite as intense as the curly parsley. And I like to use this a lot, especially for coarsely chopped parsley.
And look at how much alike your Italian parsley and cilantro
smell them.
looks.
There's absolutely a huge difference. And cilantro, which is coriander, is a very unique flavor. There's nothing else quite like it. And the same could be said true for all these herbs. Each one has a unique flavor for the most part. But I think cooking with herbs, once you start, you're going to get to know them so well, and you're going to never be able to go back to the dried spices and the dry herbs again.
It's a great way to save on fats, too. You know, I mean, you could flavor more with herbs than you do with salt and fat and so forth.
For sure.
And how about, let me not lose these little guys here.
Marjoram is a close relative to oregano, and oregano is a little more bitter than marjoram. I like marjoram for most cooking a little better, so this is an herb you can substitute marjoram and oregano.
Very strong smell.
With thyme, there's many types of thyme. This is a lemon thyme, which has a little lemon scent in addition to the flavor of the thyme. You can interchange any of the thymes together.
You can definitely smell the
rosemary is totally unique. There's no other herb that is like rosemary. And you would want to, either you like it or you don't. And so you want to stick, if you like it, you're going to want to use it a lot.
Now, when you cook, I'm tasting these now, but when I cook them, what's going to happen? Do they become stronger?
No, they're going to become less strong. And herbs tend to lose flavor under heat. Some lose their flavor completely, some lose little bits. So rosemary is an herb that can take quite a bit of heat and still keep some flavor. Cilantro, almost any heat at all will kill the flavor of it.
Every Italian dish calls for basil.
And basil can take a certain amount of heat. This is not, it would look better on the plant for sure.
I have to tell you, even in my garden, it tends to look a little like this. It says a lot for my garden.
Basil damages very quickly. It's the first crop to die every year.
Licorice
in my herb garden, as soon as it's even close to freezing, the basil dies down. So it is very delicate and it bruises very easily.
Now you use a lot of this, don't you?
You do.
Versus very little of the rosemary.
Rosemary is much more pungent than basil. Parsley is an herb that you can use in generous proportions. Dill, you can be fairly generous. Cilantro, only if you like it. But with herbs like mint and oregano, these are strong herbs, so you want to use them sparingly. Sage is also a very strong, unique flavored herb.
What's the difference between herbs and spices?
Well, herbs are the leaves of certain plants, and spices come from the seeds and the nuts of certain plants.
Now, if there's a variety in anything, it's lettuce.
There are. And we have some beautiful lettuce here. This lettuce is, I'm noting that it's organically grown.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that everyone knows with the organics, they've improved so much by using sprays that don't use chemicals. And by definition, if something is organic, there is no chemical fertilizer, no chemical pesticide used on the product, and the soil has not been treated with any chemicals. So it's a very clean, natural way of farming. And as a matter of fact, until about 100 years ago, everything was organic.
That's a good point. Does it affect the taste?
Yes, it does. Swiss chard, another green.
What do you do with that?
You want to blanch it first and then cook it again with bacon or onions, like all the greens, the collard greens, mustard greens, chard. It's a hearty, rich flavored green.
So a little bacon, a little onion,
yeah,
a little salt
great.
and pepper. How about shelf life on all of these fruits and vegetables?
You know, the root vegetables, carrots and beets and turnips, they'll keep quite a while. But in general, I think you should just buy what you need for a few days. And especially green vegetables do not last. The lettuces don't last at all. The herbs only last a few days. So buy what you need for a couple days and then...
And keep them in the refrigerator.
I should point out, though, that there are a few exceptions. Potatoes, onions, garlic, and things like squash that are already protected should not go in the refrigerator. They should be kept in a cool, dark, dry place.
What happens if you do put them in the refrigerator?
Well, if you do, for instance, onions will start to go moldy. Potatoes turn what we call sweet. The starches start to convert to sugar, and they get real soft and mushy.
Huh.
And it's much better to keep them in a dry environment.
You know, meat counters can really test your patience. You come shopping knowing that you want a steak to charcoal broil tonight, so which of these is steak? Or maybe you want a pot roast to make the night before so you can heat up after work the next day. Which one's pot roast? Jasper, help!
If you think of your own body and the muscles that you use a lot, those are the tougher muscles. So when you look at a meat chart, you'll see the center, the rib and the loin section are the real tender parts. And on your body, that's the same thing because you're not using those muscles. Whereas the shoulder, the front, the legs, you're getting tougher. And as you get down towards the shanks and the muscles that are really doing a lot of work, you've got a lot of toughness.
Makes sense. So tender cuts of meat cook quickly like steaks, and tough cuts you have to cook a long time like
right.
pot
Either you have
roasters
to cook them a long time or you have to have a trick, like with the flank steak, by a certain way of slicing it.
To illustrate tender and tough, how about we deal with beef here and what we might use as a steak. So let's do the tender ones first.
Okay, your tender cuts of steak, as Jasper mentioned, come out of the center of the animal. This is a sirloin.
And this came off of that, did it?
And these came off of this.
All right, so you see this, you know, it's a sirloin and it's got the bone in it.
This particular steak has a piece of bone in it, Natalie.
The porterhouse?
The porterhouse is a continuation of the strip steak with the tenderloin left in.
This is the tenderloin part?
This is the tenderloin part.
And this is the sirloin part?
This is the sirloin part.
What's the difference between T-bone and porterhouse?
T-bone steaks either have just a very small amount of tenderloin or no tenderloin at all, but they do have the bone in it. As you can see, the shape of the bone is in a T.
So this cut here is the filet mignon.
That's the filet mignon.
Which is this piece here?
Which is this piece here.
I see.
Which actually sits up on top of this with the bone in between.
Now this has less taste, I find, than a sirloin. Why is that? Because
Less
it doesn't
flavor.
have the bone and fat?
This is the only dormant muscle on the animal. This piece of meat does not move. If the steer is walking or running or lying down or up on its hind legs, this piece of meat does not move.
Okay.
It's, you know, there's no
That's why we
muscle
need sausage
structure
for
in
filet
it.
mignon.
That's
yeah,
right.
I'd say so. Yep.
Whereas, now what gives this the flavor? These other cuts of meat, the bone and the fat?
The bone and the fat give it the flavor. As you can see, there is an outlying fat, but the fat that we're looking for is the marbling. Marbling is the intramuscular fat that runs through the piece of meat. As you can see on
These show a
little,
lot more marbling here on
Right.
these pieces.
Now what's too much marbling? Like this piece, I have to tell you, let me see if I unwrap this. I might reject this in a case if I were buying it compared with this. To me, that looks too fatty.
Right. This is the end of the sirloin, and it's
How's it
just
labeled?
starting to go into the rump. It should be labeled vein end steak or nerve end steak.
All right, I've also heard the expressions Delmonico steak, ribeye steak, and that's coming off this rib here?
That's coming off the rib, and the Delmonico steak and the ribeye steak are one in the same. It's just terminology to confuse the
It does a good job.
consumer. It does a very good job.
So this is also prime rib.
This is also prime rib, left on the bone in a piece, 2 ribs, 3 or 4 ribs, or 7 ribs, of which there are only 7 ribs.
And when you cut it off,
maximum.
you've got a Delmonico or
Cut it
a
off, you've got a Delmonico,
ribeye.
or if you leave it whole, you've got a rib roast.
I can remember my mom telling me, always ask the butcher for the first cut when you're asking for roast beef. Now, why is that?
Well,
More tender?
lore has it that it's the most tender piece of meat. Whether it's the first cut of the rib or the first cut of the strip, it's where
It's right
they
in the
meet,
center.
right in the center of the animal.
Economy comes into play here when you're buying steak, obviously. I mean, you don't have to, if you don't have enough money to buy filet mignon, which is the most expensive,
Yes,
right?
it is.
Or even sirloin or porterhouse, which is pretty pricey, you can still enjoy a good steak with flank or what? London broil?
Or London broil, which these particular London broils are cut from the rump or the sirloin end of the loin.
Now, how tender is rump compared with T-bones and sirloins?
Rump, as we're progressing away from the center of the animal, the rump is less tender.
Okay.
So there's a technique in cooking it and carving it.
What do I do with this, Jasper?
Well, you cook it rare. That always helps to start with. And you're going to carve it against the grain. So you're not depending on the fat for tenderness, you're depending on the way that you cut it. In general, when you get into the tougher pieces of meat, it's not a quality factor because you have to remember they taste delicious. And sometimes the tougher the meat is, sometimes the more flavorful it is. It just demands a different style of cooking.
Tell me about Angus. But am I buying something special here?
Yes, you are buying something special. What Angus is, it's done by approximately 20 packers throughout the country. And they go and they cull out the top third of the choice grade of cattle.
You mentioned a term I hear, choice, prime.
Choice,
whatever.
prime, and select is the lesser,
Which is the top, choice or prime?
prime is the top.
Prime is the top. Well, is choice
So
really okay? I mean,
Choice is fine.
Choice is great.
fine. And the Angus denotes the top third of the choice grade.
oh, I see.
This is a choice piece of meat. There's not an awful lot of marbling in it. This is a choice piece of meat. There's a good amount of marbling in it. This is a choice piece of meat. There's an excellent amount of marbling in
So
it.
it's rather subjective when it's labeled.
It's very subjective. This could be on the borderline of prime.
So the shopper needs to learn something too.
Oh,
Needs
this
to-
could be on the, excuse me, this could be on the borderline of prime meat?
Yes,
In
it
other
could.
words, the more marbling is
The more
is
marbling
the better?
is the better.
Right.
I would have thought exactly the opposite.
Given the preference, I prefer top choice. I don't see the need for all the extra fat in the meat.
You're
How
going to
much
take a
fat you
roast off here that in the chain stores, they use it as a sirloin tip roast. This part is actual pot roast. See the grain is going this
I
way?
recognize that as maybe bottom round.
That's exactly what it is, bottom round. Now
Okay.
this comes off of the same thing, but if it's tied correctly, it can be used as an oven roast. See, we would tie it the other way.
And what
we
is
would
that?
tie it this way.
Is
That's
that-
called a sirloin tip roast.
Sirloin tip roast.
You would pay a little bit more money for these.
Than for the bottom
Than
round.
for the bottom round,
But less
because
than
I'm
for a
taking-
sirloin roast.
Yes, because I'm taking the best part off of it. And the further back you go here, the tougher it gets.
And the chuck is coming off of what?
The shoulder.
The shoulder.
Now this would be a chuck pot roast that you would buy in
And they
almost
get,
any butcher shop.
this is the piece I recognize that falls apart for me in my
Yes,
pork after
right,
I've
yes.
stewed it. Or
The chuck is also a continuation of the rib. That's why earlier when you were asking why your mother said, get the front part of the rib is down in here. And when they separate the rib from the chuck, now you're coming into this piece. So you're right up into the tough part of it.
So per usual, my mom knew what she was talking about.
100%. Yep.
Okay. Time and price are big factors in determining what you want to buy. If it's 5:30, you're on your way home from work, you're not going to want to deal with stew meat. Conversely, if you want to make something ahead that will not only keep or taste better the next day, so-called stew meat may be just what you want. And preparation time is a factor too. A roast takes 1 or 3 hours in the oven, but only about 5 minutes to prepare. So you have all that time to either make something else or enjoy your friends and family.
These center cuts have two ends on them. They have a porterhouse end, which has the pork tenderloin on it, and the eye muscle. The side muscle goes the whole length of the pork roast. The better part for roasting of the pork roast, us in the industry believe, there's the rib end.
That's my favorite.
That's See, what I've taken off is all the tenderloin is still on there, and these get cut into center cut chops.
Okay.
But they tend to be a little bit dry sometimes. So if you
So
want
this is labeled what in a store?
center cut pork chops.
Center cut pork chops. And this is
This is pork rib roast.
pork rib
Bone
roast.
in. You take this piece of chine bone off.
And you've just done that for us.
I have just done that.
Now, when you slice this at the table, you just cut these ribs, right?
Right, these little feather bones would come off, and then if you had to cut this at the table after it's roasted, you can just go right down through it like that with no problem at all.
Beautiful. Lamb is another great roast. Now, you rarely get to see this whole leg of lamb, but we thought we'd dissect it here, if you will, so you get a better sense of what it is you're buying when you see it in a case. Okay, let's show us all.
If I was to take this now, just the way it is, trim it up just a little bit more, and put some strings across it, and then crack this joint here, that would be a family-style lamb leg. The other way you can do it, if you don't want to deal with the bone, you can buy boneless.
A boneless leg of lamb?
Boneless.
But
This
Jasper,
would be-
would I want that bone in there so for flavor?
I think a roast cooked on the bone is definitely going to have more flavor. But again, this you might want to be doing something special like stuffing it. And in that case, you wouldn't want to have the bone.
Look at this, how easily that came out.
Easy if you have about
Easy.
20 years experience
Right.
cutting it.
If you were gonna stuff this, this is what they call a tunnel bone lamb leg. It's just a tunnel in here. You would put the stuffing in here, and then wrap this, and the butcher would give you string, and you just tie it up yourself.
Or I could
And
cook
then
it without
roast it.
stuffing it, right? Just like this?
Exactly.
You could just season it, put herbs or something.
How about this? What if I had you bone it, but I had you leave it in for flavor while I cooked it, just before I served it? I pulled it.
Sure, that could be done.
You could do that, yeah.
Just
That
put it back.
sounds
That would
like
be
a
pretty
ticket.
innovative, I think.
Another way that you can do it is if you're gonna cook it on the grill, you want butterfly leg of lamb.
Right,
It's
yes.
And
the
now it's
same-
not a roast, but it'll be...
Now, what does that
same
mean,
thing.
butterfly?
Well, I'll show you. When you open it up this way,
Okay, it has wings
and
like
you
a
open
butterfly?
it up like this, it looks exactly like a butterfly.
Aha.
Now,
Now, how do you
is
cook this?
similar.
Like a steak?
This is similar to doing London broil.
Right.
You marinate this. Now you put it on your grill whole, and you slice it any way you want. The key to it is slice it as thin as you can slice it, and
But you
then
do
it's
need-
going to eat nice.
See, but you do need to marinate this for tenderness,
It's
right,
nice
Jasper?
to
You
marinate it for tenderness and for some extra flavors, too.
Is this lamb?
That's a rack of lamb. What we're into now is an expensive part of the animal, but an excellent part. This is dinner for two, or three, depending on,
2.
okay, dinner for two.
One in my case.
You can purchase it like this, as is, or you can buy it net weight already fixed like this.
Gee, there's nothing on these ribs, though.
That's exactly right.
A trimmed piece of meat might cost twice as much, but what you're going to find is you're going to have 50% loss by the time he trims this. So you're really buying the trimmed meat. You're really not paying any more than you would if you bought the meat and brought it home
Wow,
and
look how
trimmed
much
it
fat's
yourself.
coming off of this. Look at this. I wouldn't
This
have
is
guessed that it was
this is
that
the
much.
French style of doing a rack of lamb.
So when you see it, when a recipe says French-styled rack of
French,
lamb,
yeah.
that what French means
Well,
is
it's-
what? Taking this fat
Take
off?
everything off. That's the key to it. French it down. This is what they're saying.
Okay.
Taking it right down to the meat.
And a crown roast of pork or crown roast of lamb is just making this a circle?
Yep. And
Well, you take a longer one.
You have to have two. So you're going to have
Oh,
to serve
two.
at least. You're going to have to serve at least 4 people. And in pork, you're going to have to serve at least 6 people, because
So you have
need
2 of these
to
to make a
come
circle.
around. Yes. And that would give
And you
it
would
a
just
crown.
match this up with another, okay.
Yeah, and you take the trimmings from here and grind it up and put it in here, and they use it as a stuffing.
When I'm buying chicken, Jasper, what's the most important factor?
Well, the single most important factor, unlike red meat, would be the freshness of the chicken. And like a piece of fish, you smell it. It should have a nice, clean smell, and it should not feel
Shouldn't
sticky.
smell like much of anything?
No, it should never have a strong smell. It
Okay.
should just have a nice, clean smell, and it should feel soft and never feel sticky.
One characteristic of looking at a whole chicken to determine the freshness is you look at the joint, and if the joint's got a nice, clear, opaque color to it as opposed to being dark, that's one way of telling that the chicken is fresh.
Opaque versus dark, okay.
Opaque versus dark. Also, if you notice these little pimples, if you will,
Yes.
or where the quills were pulled or the
Sure.
feathers were pulled, these should be predominant. These should be sticking out as these are. If you see them and they're disappeared, it means that the poultry is
Old?
older.
Oh,
is older.
Okay, so we'll look for the
it's-
prickers to be out. John, I notice this is white. Now you see some chickens are like an egg yellow.
Right.
Does that denote age or?
No, the chickens that have the yellow in them are usually finished in the feed with marigold petals or a flower petal that brings out the yellow color
that
in
okay?
the skin. That's fine. That's, it's natural feed.
It's okay, but I think for my taste, the white chickens are more natural. This is the chicken I grew up eating.
What's the difference between a broiler and a fryer?
The difference between a broiler and a fryer is in the size, Natalie. A fryer is a chicken that's about 2.5 or 3 pounds, and a broiler is a chicken that's 3.5 to 4 pounds.
And a capon?
Capons are just larger birds that have taken longer to grow.
Or a roaster?
As are roasting chickens, or spent hens, or roosters, which are used for soups and stews.
So a roaster is just a bigger chicken.
Roaster is
it's a
just
little older.
it's a bigger chicken.
You know, so often you see in a recipe call for a meat that you might not recognize, pancetta, prosciutto, or a cured meat, or like a corned beef or smoked meat. Maybe we can get a sense of that. What's the difference, for example, between cured and smoked?
Well, it all goes back to a time before we had refrigeration when we used to cure and preserve a lot of meats. So there's a couple ways to preserve meats, and usually 9 out of 10 times it's with a salt cure, and it can be a dry or a liquid cure. And these are usually done in a liquid brine. This is a corned brisket.
Like for corned beef and cabbage?
Right. The prosciutto's done in a dry cure, and then it's dried by hanging it in a very windy place.
Like
And it's
prosciutto
only
and melon?
done- This is from Parma, Italy, a very windy, dry air, and these hams are cured outside in dry air. Only place in the world that they do that. The pancetta, this is a rolled bacon, and again, this is salt cured, and this is a Westphalian ham. This was cured, but it was also smoked.
Now, I think most people are familiar with beef and lamb and pork, but veal can be something of a mystery. You see in a restaurant, veal alla marsala or veal parmesan.
Well, it shouldn't, people shouldn't be intimidated by veal. It's simply a young calf. It's typified by its light color and by its tenderness, and which is why veal is very expensive, and another reason why people don't cook it at home as much.
This you would cook like a chop?
It's a veal porterhouse chop. These are readily accessible. Chain stores, almost everybody is carrying this. Veal shoulders, everybody carry for
You
roast.
would cook that like a roast?
Exactly.
So look up in a recipe
Yeah.
book timing and
And stuff it.
Okay.
Veal top, you can make cutlets out of it. And,
This comes from the leg of the veal. This is the most tender cut off the leg.
Now tell me this. All right, here's a little cutlet. Why do so many recipes say pound it?
They pound it because if you were just to cook this the way it is, it's going to cook uneven. If it calls for sauteing for 30 seconds, a minute and a half, it's thick here, it's thin here, because you're dealing with the human element, cutting it by hand, and it's impossible to get it.
So you're pounding it to make it even, not to
Exactly.
make it tender.
Not to make it tender.
This meat is already tender.
I notice you use paper and not plastic.
Yeah, I think the good thing to remember is when the butcher puts the meat into paper, if you're going to cook it within a day, leave it in the paper. It doesn't need the plastic wrap. Plastic does nothing beneficial in the short term for meat.
Now,
whereas the paper allows the meat to breathe, and the drying is beneficial to the meat.
So if you get meat in plastic, as most of us do in a supermarket,
Right.
what should we do? Take it out?
I always take mine out right away.
And what do I do with it though?
Well, if it's let's say it's a roast, you might just dry marinate it right then, after you take it out, and just leave it, or you can put it back into some wax paper. But the idea is to let some air get around that meat. These folks should remember that when you are shopping and you're buying and you're going into small shops, the more of a relationship that you develop with the purveyors, the more they're going to get to know what your needs are, you're going to know what their quality level is, and the better the relationship you have. For instance, John and I, we've been doing business for 15 years together. When I say, John, I need this, he knows what I want. So that's the same way you should do it when you're shopping for your home.
So you go to the fish store and you say, I want to get some fish. But how do you decide what kind of fish you're going to get? Well, there may be a couple of things you want to take into consideration. how many people you're serving, how much time you have, and how much money you have in your pocket.
Well, those are great considerations. Another thing you want to think about is the season. For instance, it's summertime now, and Kim here is cutting up swordfish, and this is really the only time of year that swordfish is native to this part of the world.
Now look how fresh they look. They look shiny. They're supposed to look shiny, huh?
There's a lot of moisture in the swordfish. It's not dried out. It's got a nice red bloodline.
You see this? It looks wet and shiny. Now if it looks dry, that's an old fish, right?
Yes, it is. Because all fresh fish is going to retain its moisture.
And it should smell like nothing, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't smell like fish.
No, it just smells neutral.
So if it smells fishy, it's old.
Right.
Now, not everybody gets a chance to see the whole fish and see that it's nice and slimy and red gills. Well, let's see what those fillets look like when you see them in a case. It's looking for the same thing, huh? Shiny.
Well, everything in here, to me, looks gorgeous. Look at this shiny white flounder. This tuna looks like #1 tuna. It's so beautiful.
Well, what do you mean #1? Does it come in different grades or something like meat does?
Well, there's #1 and 2. I'll let Kim explain those to you.
Yeah, there's basically 3 grades of tuna. There's a #1 grade, there's a #2 grade, and there's a #3 grade. #1 grade is a sushi quality, usually used to eat raw. #2 and #3 are steak grades. We try to buy the highest grade of #2 just because it gives that nice bright red appeal to it.
So the redder the better.
You
Absolutely.
almost never see grade #1 here. Most of it goes to Japan.
Exactly.
Is that right?
But when something's really beautiful, we refer to it as something that looks like one.
So once again,
Here's-
you're looking for a wet
Right,
look.
here's some beautiful bluefish. Now, it doesn't matter what color the fish is, whether it's white fish or red or pink or brown. You're looking for a shine to the fish and a nice moistness. And this is gorgeous. This is definitely one of the underrated species of fish, I think.
You're big on bluefish, I know.
I love bluefish. Yeah,
I catch them, but I rarely eat them. Now, once again, this needs to be not smell, right? You mind
None
if
at
I take
all.
this liberty
No.
here? No smell whatsoever?
No.
None.
Absolutely none.
0.
I did wash my hands before we started this. All right, how about the swordfish? Anything special we should look for here?
Just again, nice moisture, nice moist pieces of swordfish, a nice red bloodline on the fish.
See, now the color, I've seen swordfish very different colors,
Exactly.
much more white or gray. That denotes age?
No, not at all. It's
Oh.
different swordfishes are going to have different colors. Now,
Oh.
you can see in the case right now, we have actually 2 different fish in the case. There's one, and there's another one. You see, there's not much of a difference, but can you see just in the bloodline itself?
I figured it was just another cut from the...
No, it's not. It's
not.
actually 2
Same
different
thing.
fish that when we...
So a white or a gray or a swordfish may be just a different fish.
That's
Doesn't-
exactly
doesn't
what it
mean
is.
it's
Right,
bad.
and sometimes, depending on what they're feeding on, the color can depend on the feed. We've even seen swordfish that's bright pink.
No kidding.
They call that like a salmon swordfish.
And the
Scrod? Yes. Okay, again, this is a white fish, but notice how the nice, very moist inside on the fish, not dried out at all, and
And a fairly economical fish, right?
yes, it is.
We were talking about those, no smell
Absolutely
again.
not.
Those 20 people coming for dinner, this might be a good one, huh? We could put it in the pan and throw them all in the oven at the same
There you
time.
go, that would work out.
Okay. And how about shrimp now? I know that in New England, most shrimp is not caught off of our shores here, so you get most of your shrimp frozen.
Exactly. The 3 different sizes of shrimp in this showcase all are from different areas of the world. These shrimp are from Mexico, the smaller shrimp are from Ecuador, and the larger shrimp are from Panama.
Huh. Now help me to know how to buy this fresh. So when it thaws, should I be looking for lack of smell, I suppose?
Again, notice the shell is nice and firm on the shrimp.
Okay. Yeah, I
Okay.
can feel that.
You might detect a small iodine smell on shrimp, but that is perfectly natural.
Okay. But it doesn't smell bad. I mean, I've smelled bad shrimp. and
Exactly.
This is not that. Okay.
You'd know right away.
Okay. Okay, let's check out the lobsters. I've always heard you should never buy a dead lobster. Make sure it's kicking.
Well, that's surely the truth, and whoever told you that was right. There's something else, though, and this concerns lobster, this concerns all seafood, is that seafood is not just generic. So other than freshness, the other thing that you want to know is where does the seafood come from? And the average consumer is not going to be able to tell that, but you want to work with somebody like Kim, and Kim knows, and I know I could ask Kim you know, where are these lobsters from? And he's going to tell me where they came from.
So like a Maine lobster is better than a lobster?
Well, there's no question that
Chesapeake Bay or something.
we've got a large coast here. In certain areas they're more polluted and certain areas are very clean. So we like to buy lobsters from northern Maine, from Nova Scotia, and
the only way you know that is by asking the person
To
from
go to
whom
your
you're
deli.
buying your fish from.
right. See this lobster?
He's kicking.
The arms are up.
So his arms are up over his head.
And the arms are down. You got a sleepy lobster.
And you just shouldn't
And,
pass on him, huh?
Yeah, you leave that for the fish dealer, and they'll cook it off, and they use the meat for things.
Now, Kim and Jasper, I have to report so many stories on contamination, on red tide, on pollution. I've got to tell you, it's left me as a consumer concerned, especially when it comes to shellfish.
Well, I think that the first thing you have to do is really find a fish purveyor that you really trust. And the things that he needs to know are where his stuff is coming from. And all shellfish is tagged in the beds, and he knows if it's a legitimate legal bed that it's been taken out of. And, you know,
The date stamped right on it.
the date is stamped right on there.
Assuming they're safe, how do I know they're fresh?
Okay, when you pick up a clam, this is a live animal in this shell, okay? And also you feel the weight.
Let me grab one of these.
Yep.
Okay.
Also, tap the clam, okay? It doesn't sound hollow, therefore both these are alive clams.
Okay.
Okay.
What would it sound like?
If it isn't,
Right. Oh.
see that? You
Big
can tell
difference.
this is a clunker. That means that the animal inside of this is dead.
That's an oyster.
That's an oyster.
The hollow sound means
And
trouble.
when Kim was talking about the weight, what he's talking about is a fresh, live clam. It's got a lot of juice in it, and the juice adds the weight. And you get to the older clams, or clams that are dying,
Dry
they
out.
open up, they dry out, and they lose that weight that comes with the liquid.
How about these little guys?
Steamers? Steamers, see how the clam is shut on the steamer?
Yes?
Okay.
And this one's a little open.
That one's a little open, but see that? The neck, if you poke the neck,
He pops right back
it
in?
retracts, exactly.
Okay. Back, boy, back.
See that? Even if there's any movement on it, you know the clam's alive.
Okay, that's all you're looking for.
Exactly.
And your muscles?
And with mussels, okay? Mussels, there are no neck on mussels. It's the same principle as a clam, but they're a lot lighter, okay? If a mussel is closed, it is alive.
All right. If
Okay.
it's open, it's not?
No, some mussels gape when they get out of the water, and they're going to open up a little bit. And the best thing to do with the mussel is take your thumb and your forefinger.
Here's one.
There you go. Okay. Take your thumb and your forefinger and use it as a springboard. Okay? And if the mussel closes,
Yeah, you know why this one's not closing? He left.
oh, he's still in there.
He is?
Yeah.
Oh.
But if this mussel was still alive, it would close. The shell would close right back out. It would retract.
So we'd get rid of that one. Dead muscle.
He's a dead mussel.
He's
right?
finished. Okay, I'm ready to take my Grace Solo home, my favorite.
If it's a hot day, remember to keep it in a refrigerated bag or to put it in a cooler.
You know, I didn't know you had this service. Kim was telling me that they either give you a little ice or these cooler packs on a real hot day. So I brought this just in case we had to make some other stops and we wouldn't get this home in time. I'd like to tell you I always carry this in the back of my car, but that would be a lie.
And that's a really excellent point. You know, when you go shopping and you're going to buy fish, go to the fish store last and take the fish home, you know, either on ice or bring a little cooler with you. And remember that if you leave a piece of fish out on a 90-degree day, even for an hour, that adds days to the life of that fish.
So you might buy it fresh and take it and get it home smelly.
You can ruin it in a few hours in the hot sun.
Exactly. The handling's a very important aspect.
All right, thank you. Good
Thank you.
lessons.
Thanks, Kim.
We covered a lot of territory.
We did.
It was fun, though, and I learned a lot.
I had a lot of fun, too.
I hope you did, too. I hope you got enough out of the techniques and the methods so that you can have fun in the kitchen, because it's really what it's all about.
That is what it's about. You know, in the 20 years that I've been cooking, the equipment has let me down, people have let me down, but the food has never let me down. And what really makes me love it, and what amazes me the most, is that after 20 years, 50, 60 hours a week, I'm still learning something every day.
That says a lot.
It does. Cheers.